by the way, we're going to go just straight live, right? And I don't have an intro video or anything like that. So for the first little while, we're just going to give people a bit of time to come in. And then, when we have a certain number of people, we'll start the interview process. So, hello, everybody. Let me see here. We have got, oh, there's already like 13 people in here. That's good. Good start. As I was just explaining to John, who got here a little late, we are going to be doing the usual thing for the RPG Pundit encounter, which is I don't have any like fancy intro video like Diversity and Dragons does or anything like that. So we're just going to say hello to you guys as you come in there. And we're going to give people, I don't know, it's about 10 minutes or so, I think is usually the amount before we get to a really viable audience before we start. Because otherwise, if we start right away and there's like 2 people in there, then
I think you got to grab that hat behind you. That hat behind you.
The red one. Yeah, that was right. This is a gift that was given to me by Bill the Elf, who's he's got the channel that has my Last Son audio, and he's like been a gamer for a long time. And of course I quite love this hat, but
beautiful.
I'm not the kind of guy that wears these hats, like any kind of hats, right? I don't wear baseball caps, right? I mean, it doesn't really fit with the style in Latin America for starters, right? So like if I would need like, I don't know what, top hat. People don't wear hats here really. If they do, they wear these like little Latin American berets.
When I was in San Salvador last, April, May, somewhere, whenever I was there last, we went to like some, my wife's father was part of like a military veterans club or whatever. And then they passed that around to generations. So we went to some pool that was like, with that, which like they had food service and all this stuff there. That was like this military veterans club. And my only swim trunks are like American flag swim trunks. And so I'm walking around in El Salvador with, all these Salvadorans everywhere at the pool, just like white as hell. Like, cause I'm very not tan at all. In my like American flag swim trunks, I look so ridiculous, but I don't care. That's what America's all about. So
that is true. That is true. Yeah. But no, I love that hat. I'm very happy that I got one. But it's just not the sort of thing I tend to wear, I just don't, I'm always, like people think that this is a costume or something that I wear, right? Like, but it's not. It's just in Uruguay, if you're, a middle class and up person, right? And you're above, let's say, the age of 30, unless you're some kind of dirty hippie, right? You dress in button shirts, you have a jacket, right? In winter, you're wearing probably a scarf because it's cold. It's not that cold anymore now. It's pretty soon I'll be having to take off the scarf. But anyways, like you dress kind of upscale compared to in North America, right? Like you wouldn't see a guy who's unless he's like on vacation in Punta del Este, you won't see a lawyer who'll be walking around just like in shorts and flip-flops or something,
Right. Yeah, that's California culture here, which really did this, right? That made everything casual. It's gotten to a point where it's a little absurd now, and you see like 40, 50-year-old men dressing like they're like 15 with like these like super baggy shirts and got backwards.
Like they're about to go skateboarding, yeah.
It's like, okay.
That's wild. All right, what are we at for numbers here? We got 30 already. Okay, so I think we can just about get started here. So I'm gonna do the introduction, I guess. So hello everyone. This is the RPG Pundit, and this is the RPG Pundit Encounter. Today we have a special guest who I've been trying to get like 3 times before this, and there was always something that got in the way. He is someone who I don't know. Normally, the people that I bring in are either complete newbies, right? Like they're people that are just starting out on their channel or just wrote their first RPG product, and then we introduce them to people, or they are like famous in the RPG hobby because, you know, they're like Sandy Peterson, who created Call of Cthulhu, right? Or Alexander Macris, or, you know, these legends among us, right?
Well, you're a legend. Baptism of Fire is legendary at this point. I love that game. It's good stuff.
Thank you. That's the other part of today's episode, is that this happens to be the closest to the 20th anniversary of me being the RPG pundit, right? I started this gig 20 years ago, right? And that is a long time by the standards of anybody else, right? Like, I was doing the whole internet shitlord thing before anybody else did it, you know, and managed to survive every cancellation attempt. So this is kind of a commemoration of my anniversary year. So anyways, this is Jon Del Arroz. And if you know science fiction, you'll probably know about him. But if you're a gamer who doesn't read sci-fi novels, maybe you don't. So he has a very interesting YouTube channel that I watch quite often. He also is into all kinds of stuff related to gaming, and we're going to ask him about his relationship to RPGs, but of course we're also going to talk about science fiction, and we're going to talk about some other topics as well, including
like tennis.
Religion. Tennis, did you say?
Well, it's a game, right?
Yeah.
So we can talk about tennis. It's thematic, right?
We could talk about tennis. It's not a typical subject for here, but no, I want to talk to you a lot about your. You've apparently written a book. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard about it. That is a critique of certain elements of modern day Christianity. That you believe you called it churchianity, right?
Yes, and I'm shocked actually on that because I mostly write science fiction and fantasy. I do comics as well, and I stay in that lane pretty hard, which is never a good idea. If you go directly into commentary on religion and politics, you get much bigger, much faster. But if you stay in things like RPGs, for example, it cultivates much more of a niche audience, which when you're trying to change the culture, it feels like beating your head against a wall quite often, as I'm sure you're aware also. But yeah, I was surprised when I came out with this, just because I have such a sci-fi and comics oriented audience. I thought I don't know what's going to happen when I come out with this. It's just been something I've been kind of working on for a few years, ever since I was in a church that went super woke, and then I just had to leave and reverted to Catholicism, as one does. And I was like, I didn't know how this was going to go, and this is the fastest selling book for its first month I've ever had. It's already moved over 1,000 copies. So I'm like, wow. Appreciate everybody reading. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to talk a bit more about that later on, because we want to start with the let's say the more geeky stuff, and then we'll go on to the stuff that is of interest to a comparative religion geek like me. We have, I don't know if you ever watched this show, the RPG Pundit Encounter, but we always have a guest, and we always start with the same question and we end with the same question, the interview. All the other questions in the middle are dependent on the guest, right? Also, just so you know, because I didn't have much, I was going to talk to you about this before we started, but you came in right at the end. So we do take questions from our audience, right? So if people post questions or comments and things like that, now you don't have to answer anything you don't want to answer, right? But I take a careful look at what people are saying on the chat, and obviously, guys, if you want to guarantee that I will read what you say, unless it'll get me demonetized, you can use the super chat, right? But you don't have to use the super chat. If you ask an interesting question, then you would be or make a funny comment like this one. Then you could definitely just post it, and I am going to share it, right? But
he's right. You do look like you live in Ben Kenobi's house there. Yeah.
Well, this is actually an architectural style, a native architectural style to Uruguay, which is called the Casa Pueblo style, right? It's stucco type walls and everything. But I love it. I like that I look like I live in Ben Kenobi's house, right? So in any case, you guys, if you want to support this show, then please do send a super chat, but don't feel obliged to just to make sure your question will be asked, right? Unlike many other live streamers these days, they will only ever pay attention to a comment that's a super chat. But I will, if I see a good, useful, intelligent question, you don't have to give me the super chat. Give me a super chat if you want to support me in the work I'm doing here, okay? So the first question that we ask every single person here, you are a guy who has been around for a while now, right? For quite a while, many years, involved in, again, science fiction, fantasy, and you've been in the peripheries, at least, of the RPG scene, and probably other things as well, comic books, right? All of that. And my question is, who has been good to you and who has been bad to you? This is your chance to call out
Wow.
people.
Who's been good to me? Who's been very, very good to me have been Vox Day, first and foremost, who's the author of an epic fantasy series as well, called the Arts of Dark and Light, and he also wrote the really interesting #1 political philosophy book called SJWs Always Lie. And since day one, since my kind of coming on the scene, he has just been a mentor. He's been supportive. He's been helping me push my books. I mean, everything from helping me learn how to write better to just being a good friend. He's been absolutely amazing. Who's been really bad to me is just anybody on the left at all. let's just say that at this point. Or what is it? The radical left crazies out there have been just trying to shut me down the entire way. And they got me, let's see, I'm at this point, I'm racking up my bans, right? I was banned from Twitter before Elon took over. So there was that. Banned from Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Patreon, the World Science Fiction Convention, Tom Vassel's Dice Tower Convention, also banned from. And I haven't... Yeah, I haven't attempted to go to Gen Con, but I'm very certain if I did, I would be banned.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm sure I would never be allowed inside the doors of Gen Con, right? But I'm scared having like people saying we're banning the RPG Pundit from these cons because I don't live in North America, right? So I don't go to those cons now. I'm not banned anywhere in Uruguay, right? Uruguay has a booming RPG scene, and I am like,
that's cool.
I'm the most successful RPG writer that Uruguay has ever known, right? I am the absolute top, right? Out of the hundreds of Uruguayans who make RPGs, right? I am the best one, And so I go into these things, and it's like I can't believe, because when I first got here, let's pointing out this 20-year span, right? So when I first got here, nobody knew about me. I had just started this little blog on Zanga, that was the RPG Pundit, but I wasn't well known. I hadn't made any RPGs yet. I hadn't, I was just a blogger, right? And so people treated me like anybody else, right? Like I was just the guy, right? This guy that was the Canadian, they called me, right? And the guy with the pipe, right? And it was like nothing. And then, for a couple of years, when I was like starting to make my products, my books, like Lords of Olympus, and then Arrows of Indra, and then I started working on 5e and all of that, right? I was mostly too busy to attend any of the local cons. And they have like a really active scene. There's like hundreds of gamers in Uruguay. And they have all these different little like mini cons. Some of it is like funded by the government from like the Ministry of Youth, shit like that. Yeah, like so it's a very active and very interconnected community, right? It's not like in North America, mostly it's like little gaming groups that are all alone, right? And they're their old high school buddies in their basement, and then occasionally going to cons. But this is like a really interconnected community. And so I didn't have a lot of time to do anything about it for a little while. And then I go back when somebody asks me to, they invite me to go there as a guest of honor, right? And I was like, oh, okay, right? I go there. And suddenly they're like, this was now, about 10 years in, right? So there's like this whole other generation of like now much younger gamers than me who had never known me back when I was just the Canadian dude, right? Like the people who knew me back then, they didn't really care what I'd done. Like they're like, oh yeah, these are good books, but whatever. But these other kids, right, who never knew who I was or who never saw me before, suddenly they were like surrounding me like I was a rock star, right? Like I couldn't believe it. It was just the weirdest thing. Like everybody wanted to play at my table. Everybody wanted to ask me questions, because some of my games, obviously from friends of mine who publicized them in the Uruguayan scene, became very popular games here. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on a tangent on you there, but
I forgot one
yeah,
other
you
guy.
have been canceled by
He's been very good.
Oh yeah, good.
He's been very good. Yes, he's a good.
Yeah, he's been waiting.
So.
He's been
He
waiting
just
to
left.
say
Now that he's been on camera, he's like, I'm out.
That's right. He said his hellos and he left. That's great. My cat's around here somewhere, but so you've mentioned how many times you've been doxxed, you've been banned, you've been canceled, let's say. Is there any specific name you want to put above all others, or should we just go on to the next question?
No, because I try not to dwell on that. And so because otherwise you get nothing done. And so if I just focused on a person over and over again, it'd be a thing that that wouldn't be productive, I don't think. And eventually, like, the goal is, hopefully, like, that, these people apologize at some point and, move on and game together. I mean, I'm not a type to hold grudges beyond
I
people
wouldn't
just
hold my
going at
breath.
me over and over again, but I won't hold my breath. But I always have that hope. I'm optimistic.
So if you had to, like, take a wild stab, how many people have, like, basically tried to take you down, right, over the years?
Oh gee, I can't. It happens every couple weeks, so it's like,
For me,
okay.
it's the same thing, right? Like, I mean, I've got so many times, and there's like some guy shows up, right, and he says, this is proof. This is how horrible the RPG pundit is. He's a monster. He's terrible. And you see, I told you so before, right? And I'm like, who's this, right? and he's like, don't pretend you don't know who I am, right? I tried to take you down, but now this time I'm going to do it. Dude, I don't know who you are, right? and then he's like, how can you not know? I almost, got you banned from drive-thru. Well, you obviously didn't, right? and he's like, at one point I have to stop these people. I have to say, look, I get it, right? The day you tried to fight me was one of the most important days in your online life.
Right. It's kind of sad, right?
Tuesday, right? It was just Tuesday for me, right? Like I have no recollection of who you are, so that is how much it, like, starts to all melt together. Obviously, there's some, when a big name designer comes after you, or maybe in your case, a big name author or something decides to, take a personal interest, maybe that you remember a bit better. But all these tiny little people, right? Like, you'd think they'd guess after all these years that we're not going anywhere,
It's weird. I'm always like, I try to get along with everybody, so it's like, why do you want to fight? And I don't make it nice when people want to fight, but I definitely don't want to be fighting with anybody. It's like, I don't have time for it. I've got 3 kids and a very needy dog, as you just saw. So it's like, I got things to do. So.
Well, needy but sweet. He's well behaved. Compared. There's very good odds that when my cat shows up at some point tonight, the first thing she's going to do is try to bite me, right? So, I guess that's the difference between the species. We've got a question here. It's a bit early to get into this topic, but Prophetically Autistic asks, what's your favorite book and character of the Bible?
Romans is probably the most interesting book of the Bible because it is the most complete theological treatise in the existence of mankind, and probably one of the most brilliant, if not the most brilliant things.
It's
ever
definitely
written.
the most important of the New Testament, really.
Yeah, it contains everything, and you almost. I don't want to say you don't need the Gospels, because you do, but it's pretty close, right? So
it's also subject to, like, people, the interpretation of it. There have been a lot of different commentaries on it, right? That's what I mean. And sometimes it's funny how I've seen, like, 2 people using sometimes the same verse in Romans to suggest 2 completely opposite things,
As far as favorite character, I don't know. I have a bit of a fixation on Ananias, who's the guy who, when Paul got blinded on the road to Damascus, brought him into his house, and of course took care of him while he healed. And I wrote an outline about 4 or 5 years ago for a book that covers the life of Ananias and how his journey of faith, like, brought all this together. And I'm not confident in it because it is fiction, and I don't like writing fiction surrounding the Bible too much, because I don't want to get something wrong and be heretical somehow or whatnot.
Yeah, I guess
And I also want
there
to
are
be very
different like
careful about, yeah.
positions people take on that, right?
Right. So I don't know. I've got the outline sitting there, and I've always wanted to do it. I just never did it. So
I
yeah.
think like as a rule now, at least, because I think that in the past maybe people were even more strict about this, but now I think that the thing is, if you're trying to do biblical fiction, so to say, right, like fiction that is based on some character, something in the Bible, right? Um, the key is you got to very carefully avoid having the character say something or do something that would like directly be contradictory to what that character is about in the actual
Right.
Bible.
And since
But
there's only a
if
couple lines with Ananias in it, that's not that hard.
okay,
There's legendary lore that he was also part of a disciple group that met with Jesus earlier, but it's not actually named in the gospel, so it's kind of like a
yeah,
maybe thing, which is kind of cool. I would tie that in, I think, if I did it. But I did read a book. It was called it's called Shadow of the Galilean. I forget I'm gonna get the author name right here, which kind of inspired me towards that a while back. Gerd Thyssen is the name of the author. And the Shadow of the Galilean was following a character who was kind of following Jesus, which is kind of interesting. And so that's kind of what drew me towards that originally. It was a very good book.
hey, Double D, just saying a shout out to Diversity and Dragons here.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you, bro.
um, so yeah, no, that obviously biblically derived literature is very interesting, but you're right that it's a minefield. But we're gonna talk more about that a little bit later. So because I want to let's start with like the thing you're best known for, which is science fiction. And I guess maybe the first thing you should do, let's assume that
Not my
I mean I'm sure
RPG work. That's not what I'm known for.
probably less than your sci-fi. um, there's likely to be some people here who have not read any of your books, right?
Sure.
Or your sci-fi books, right? So why don't you give people an introduction about what type of sci-fi you do, and promote your book? Go for it.
Sure. I'm all over the map because I kind of have this. I've got a few worlds I've built, and I've got one that's more leaning towards Star Trek. I've got one that's more leaning towards Star Wars. I've got one that is, kind of my answer to Warhammer 40K. If you just decided to make that kind of not grimdark. So I've got a few different worlds that I've built and have been building universes in, and I've also got a steampunk fantasy world, which is opening up to be more fantasy, which is really, I would say that one beyond any of the others has a lot of RPG elements to it because when I built it, it was definitely at a time I was playing a lot of D&D 4th edition. And also was playing a lot of the Final Fantasy games. So from just a video game standpoint, they kind of went hand in hand on that. But those are my main worlds. I've got one-off fantasies. I've got Deus Volt, which is a comic, which is very Conan the Barbarian like, and I've got a new book out this year called The Demon's Eye, which I wrote just to kind of be like a more old school style fantasy because back in the day, I know it's shocking, but books used to be kind of one and done, and they
Yeah,
also used to be kind of short because it was almost every fantasy book that came out in the 30s and 40s and 50s was a mashup of short stories that got published in different pulp
yeah.
magazines prior to that. And so what they do is they'd call it a fix-up novel, and that was the technical term for it. Technical, I guess. And they'd take the short stories and they'd mash them together into a single narrative. And that's why a lot of these books feel like there are 3 or 4 different stories and then they kind of just randomly connect and they don't really lead anywhere. I did mine a little more to where I was actually leading towards something, but the concept was each chapter was kind of its own short story. And then I put them together. It was going to be really cool. The original concept of it was I was going to have this, and then for each short story, this folk artist named Moira Grayland, who plays the harp and sings beautifully, was going to write lyrics and record harp and singing music to go with a new song for every single chapter. Also, the main character, therefore, I made into a bard, and these are the songs are meant to be his story of the story, like in a big meta way. It was going to be a very ambitious art project, and she got really, really sick and couldn't do it. So I ended up just having this book sitting there for a couple of years, and I finally just released it this year. And that's called The Demon's Eye. So I definitely recommend that, I think, to the more D&D like people. So you might dig that. Probably the best out of those.
Now, do you have for sci-fi, you have a wide range? Like, do you do hard sci-fi and like all the way to space opera, or?
Yeah, I've done hard in short story form, but I'm mostly sticking to space opera type of genre just because that's what I like best. And again, just going back to the golden age, which is what I really, really love. Edgar Rice Burroughs and E. Doc Smith,
Planetary
those
fantasy.
space opera things really were a lot for me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what you mentioned this book, Deus Vult. Is it about a crusader?
Yeah, it's a crusade. I like to say it's like Conan mashed up with John Carter, but a crusader.
Mm-hmm.
So I take the John Carter sort of framing where he gets lost in the mountains and then kind of gets transported. Then he gets transported to a different world. But instead of getting transported to Mars, he gets transported to this fantasy world with demons and cat girls and stuff. And so,
all right, so
and
not
he's
not in the historical crusades then, right?
No, he is just a crusader who gets transported, much like John Carter was.
You need to plug my sword and caravan, right?
Oh yeah,
the third crusade, right? So there you go. But
I definitely I throw the Crusades into a lot of stuff just because I very much am interested in that time period. Right now, my sci-fi series I'm writing actually has a time travel story to it, and they're going to be traveling back to the Reconquista. In a portion of that, and so and they actually interact with El Cid in it, so that's going to be pretty fun.
Sounds cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so by the way, that I've put in the description of this video, there's in the start of the description, you'll see a link there actually for The Demon's Eye for the Amazon page, and there's also a link to Jon Del Arroz's newsletter, so you should check that out. And besides that, of course, guys, there is links to all of my current products, including my latest supplement for the Baptism of Fire setting, which is called the Last Vikings. Now, the Last Vikings is set in the same time period as Baptism of Fire, but it is set in the Isle of Jomsburg, where the last warrior pagan Vikings of the North and Baltic Sea are found. So this is kind of you're playing Scandinavians, and this is a campaign setting, right? You're playing Scandinavians in this campaign setting, and you're playing, but if you're playing the default, you're playing pagans there instead of Christians, which you play in Baptism of Fire. But of course, I talk in the setting about all the rest of Scandinavia by that time had been Christianized, and so if you prefer, you could always be a part of the armies of any number of these other guys that were the different Christian jarls. So lots of really good reviews for that one, and it's been selling like hotcakes. So check out The Last Vikings. And also, while we're on the subject of space opera, and maybe I can get some tips from John here. So I'm not sure if you know, but I did make a sci-fi, specifically a space opera RPG, because I wanted to run a Star Wars campaign with OSR rules, and I didn't find any rules that I liked enough to just use. So I just said, well, screw it, I'll make my own. And originally this was just a PDF, because it's called Star Adventure, right? And it's only like 36 pages long, right? It's a complete.
I didn't know you did this. That's cool.
It's the complete rules, and it's the smallest. People said, well, we want a print version. So okay, we did a print version. It's $9.99 for it in print, right? But it's got it doesn't have a setting in it though. It has just the rules and the kind of the space opera flavor to it, right? And so this was basically because I wanted to play Star Wars, so I couldn't put the Star Wars setting in the book. I just put the rules out, and they became really popular. Obviously, they sold well. I think part of the price was part of that, but it's also because it's a very compact and functional rule set. But lately, what I've been doing, I've got this periodical that I publish at the Red Room store that's called the PUNDIT Files, and I put all kinds of different. Every issue, I come out with an issue every 3 weeks, and every issue is a different supplement for something, right? And what I've recently started doing is making my new setting for Star Adventure, which is obviously going to be a very kind of classic space opera setting with a whole bunch of the space opera stuff. It's set in 20,000 years into the future, after humanity was at one point enslaved by an alien race, and then they broke free and made their own very vast kind of star confederation. And then they were that confederation was destroyed, along with a whole bunch of other places in the galaxy, by this robot race that started a war. And so it's got all of it's got nothing very original in terms of the influences or the styles. You're going to see there's bits of Asimov, there's bits of Heinlein, right? There's bits of Frank Herbert, all of that stuff, right? But where I do the twist to it is, because I'm mostly a history guy, right? I do historical RPGs mostly. So I said, well, how could I do that in sci-fi, right? I said, well, what if it's like the like bronze? My first thought was, what if it's the Bronze Age collapse, but in space, right? And that was the kind of the basis for it. And then I went like a step beyond that, and I'd say like the influences that are not sci-fi that are in this setting are mainly from the book of Judges and the books of Samuel, right? So it's a kind of a telling of the time when there was no king in Israel, right? That sort of thing. Anyways, my latest issue that is now at the Red Room store is finally the kind of the gazetteer for it, which is called the Races and Regions of the Galaxy, right? And that is the latest episode, the latest issue rather, of the Pundit Files. You can get it at the Red Room store right now for just $3.50. That's Pundit Files number 38. There's 37 other issues that cover all kinds of different stuff, from like, Lion and Dragon, Baptism of Fire, random OSR stuff, tables, generators, all kinds of things. There's an excellent one that's a guide to the rules for jousts and rules for horses, and that's a very good one if you're into the kind of medieval stuff. But anyway, so I just wanted to again, I'm just plugging that mostly, but I don't know. I would love it if at some point, when I'm going to end up making that in like all the little issues that are going to have the Sons of Heaven, it's called, is the setting. I'm going to put them together in a compilation, and maybe when that happens, whoever my publisher is, I'll tell them to send you a review copy, and you can tell me if I can cut it as a space opera world designer or not.
Sounds good.
I doubt it'll be as interesting as your stuff, though.
Oh, I don't know about that. Like I said, Baptism of Fire was really well done. So I really enjoyed that.
No, but it's two different skills, right?
Yeah.
Creating a setting for an RPG and writing a novel are two very different things. And I mean, like,
sure.
I know this because I know I'm not good at writing like literary fiction. So that's why I don't try to do that, right? But if you're a historian, which I am, it's easy to create settings because you just use your skills from, like your training in history to do that. So I have heard a strange rumor, though. I heard that you're like planning to shift into romance novels. Is that true?
I have one out, which is interesting. And I did it under a pen name. And it's called The Roles We Play, believe it or not. And I think it is the most innovative role-playing or innovative romance novel probably written in the last several years, because what I did was I split it about 50-50 to where it is two people who go online and online role play via Discord, and they meet via their RPG that they're playing, which is, and the RPG is actually set in my space opera setting. So they're actually playing my space opera setting. There's actually a story that develops of my space opera setting within the RPG, and then they talk out of character via DM in the story, and that's how they get to know each other over it. And so, yes, there's a romance novel framing of it, but internally there's an RPG story. Two, it's actually a full story in my space opera universe, and it's got and just the way I've got it set with like people are talking on Discord and in DM and all that. formats it really interesting to where it's very different than probably, like I said, I've never seen another romance novel like that. It's sold terribly. Now, like the problem is, and this
you haven't been contacted by Netflix or anything?
no, I thought
No?
I'm just like, this is probably one of the most brilliant things I've ever done, and yet
If you
the
made them
problem.
lesbians, you'd be rich by now. Right?
Netflix would have bought it,
given
right?
you a deal. They would
Yeah.
absolutely.
But the problem is, for real, is that people are very set on genre conventions, and especially with the marketing. So they want their cover of their space thing to, we call it, a lot of authors when we talk, we call it the spaceship butt cover, where you've got like the back of the spaceship going, and then they understand that this is meant to be a military science fiction story always, right? And so, with romance novels, it's you have to have the dude with the pecs and the torso,
with the open
right?
shirt.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, but I didn't want to market it as that because it's not a smutty thing at all, right? It is very much something that's easily adaptable to like a movie or something. So hey, Netflix. Except for the characters are white and straight, and that's a problem, I guess. But problematic is the word I should use.
Yeah.
But so
if one of
when
them
you
was
don't
furry, maybe that would have worked.
right, when you don't follow those genre conventions exactly in the marketing, it just doesn't go. And I know better. Like I know to just like slap a cover on it that either looks like a romance novel or looks like a space opera novel, and then that would sell better. But at the same time, like I wanted to like kind of alert people like this is an artistic sort of expression. It's not me just doing a genre thing, right? And so that's what I was attempting to do with that. But it's interesting stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna pause the questions from me for a while so we can catch up a bit on the questions from the gallery here, if you don't mind. What game is a worse influence on fantasy RPGs? Morkborg, Dungeon World, or Critical Role? Well, Critical Role isn't a game, but
well, they got Daggerheart. I guess you can get Daggerheart out of that, right?
I guess that's that. Yeah, although they themselves are not using Daggerheart on their
That's
show,
hilarious, right?
It proves that they have zero confidence in it, right?
No.
They know it's unplayable. Because they did one play test sort of video, right? And it was just the largest, most unbelievable slog, right? Because the mechanics are so bad that it took like it took an hour or something to do like a simple combat, right? And they're like, oh,
yeah,
Jesus, right?
It's really wonky. I don't know. I mean, I can't. I mean, I don't think Daggerheart's really had any influence on the RPG world. Like
Critical Role as a show
right?
has obviously, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So I don't know the answer to that.
Morkborg is stupid but harmless because it's really just very basic sort of D&D with edgy art. That's it, right? It has nothing. It adds nothing to the genre. So obviously, of the three, to me, Dungeon World did the most harm, right? Because it tried to infuse this story gaming nonsense into the RPG hobby. But
so that's process of elimination right there. Pretty good. I like that.
Let's see here. Question for you. What do you think cripples conservatives, Christians resisting apostasy and heresy in the church the most? We're getting into some deep theological areas. Yeah. I'm glad my audience is interested in that. I wanted to talk to you about religion. I wasn't sure how many people here would be into it.
I think the desire to be nice and the desire to be liked and accepted, right? It's always difficult because when you want to push back against something, you do risk everything. When I decided to push back against a church that I was volunteering 12 to 20 hours a week in the church. I keep my online life separate from my main life, my real life, pretty often. So people don't know what I do. But I was very, very active. And I was actually the keyboardist for one of those large churches out there, and just doing music every week. And when I wrote my letter to the pastor, like after they started going full Black Lives Matter on stuff, I mean, I knew it was going to cause a stir, but like I didn't know that, like, that letter saying, "Hey, don't do this kind of thing," like it's just degrading the church, was going to just completely shatter it. So it's like you're not even welcome there anymore. So you do risk just by standing up for traditional values, losing friends, losing, you know, your social whatever. And that was a difficult thing, because obviously I've seen it in the cancel culture online quite a bit, but it's not the same thing as when it's like, oh, this was I thought this was my community, right? And that's really, really hard to deal with. And so I guess, it takes a lot to go through with that. And it's, it's a tough thing. That definitely.
I think as a historian of religion that this has been a kind of a disease in the West, right? But in this case, specifically in Christianity, in this case, that has been going on for a very long time. Because if you look back into the 19th century, right, you had the great imperial powers. Almost all of them were driven to different degrees, in the English more than any, I think, by a very muscular vision of Christianity, right?
Right.
This kind of Christianity plus sportsmanship plus, military style honor, and then World War I happened, right? And everybody, in every one of these countries that fought there, they were, you had the preachers saying, it's your godly duty to go and kill the Hun, or vice versa, to kill the English or whatever, right? And then after that, just like the devastating effects of World War I caused a kind of crisis of faith, I think, in the clergy, where there's this complete shift from this idea of like the onward Christian soldiers to like gentle Jesus, meek and mild, right? Which is Jesus was neither meek nor mild, Sometimes he was gentle, but that like they became so afraid of being of what had perhaps been an excess of zeal in the First World War, to be able to present any kind of backbone in terms of defending Christian culture in the world, and
Right.
largely the clergy, both Protestant and Catholic, were to blame in the beginning of that, and then the whole thing got took over by Marxist elements, so that it is a long-term disease that happened, and I think only now are we like starting to get out of it to certain degrees. I've got a question here from the Batman. It's rare that Batman comes along to ask us a question, but how about an RPG for Steam and Country?
I've always wanted to do one because I've developed that setting out so much. But I don't know. I've never sat down and developed a full RPG before. That might be something that I don't know. Maybe I'll pair with you at some point to deal with the rules and all those pesky things I don't want to deal with. So
yeah, mechanics maybe.
Yeah.
Make an OSR. That's the key to success.
I do love OSR, so that does make sense to me. Yeah.
Like the OSR has now outstripped third-party D&D publishing, even before the new edition, right? Even when it was still 5th edition, it has outstripped it in terms of success in Kickstarter projects, for example. Right? Okay. Like the OSR projects are more likely to get funded and are making now, on average, more funding than if you're doing a third-party D&D book, right? So, and this has been a trend that's been going on for 5 years straight. Right, and it doesn't show any sign of necessarily abating at this point, especially now that like D&D has collapsed completely with the new edition. So the secret of OSR is that if you make a game that's OSR, people can take your book and mix it with any other OSR book, like with any of my books, and use all the same stuff without having to change anything. You don't have to do any conversion, right? And so that makes the books much more useful, because like you could be playing one game and then you think, oh, well, I need some kind of a monster. Oh, there's a monster in this completely other book written by some other guy, but it uses the exact same stats, right? So
now, is OSR completely like public domain, or how's that work?
Well, the rules, rules for a game cannot be copyrighted. Or anything like that. So that is automatically open, right? Like there are certain things you can't copy that are like trademarked stuff from Dungeons and Dragons. So for example, you could not create a monster that was specifically invented for D&D, right? Like You can't have a beholder. You could have an eye tyrant, right, which is similar
Okay,
to a
gotcha.
beholder, but it's not a beholder because you're not using that name, right? And you can't use like Melf's acid arrow, right? But you could use like, you know, acid dart or something like that, right? So there are a few things you have to watch out for to like not use some of the nomenclature. But in every other respect, if you're basing it, especially on like from the original rules of D&D, right? Like all of that stuff is pretty much in the clear, right? Because there's and also there's literally thousands of games that have now been published, and Wizards of the Coast, because they also had the open gaming license, they're not even going to bother to go after any, like, you'd have to make a game that sold more than their peak D&D period for them to even try, right? Because and none of us are going to do that, right? If you're a small publisher, you're not going to do that. You're going to do real well for yourself if you make a good game, but you'll still be too small for them to even bother with, right? So nobody in the OSR, to my knowledge, has ever been had any kind of a problem. There are some people that are terribly worried about that still, but it's been like 20 years now, right? Or almost 20 years. So I think we're safe, you know, like they haven't even tried to go after the guys that, you know, people try to cancel or stuff like that.
Interesting.
Like us, you know?
Yeah, it's something that I've wanted to do, and at some point, and I'm sure if we did a Kickstarter, it'd be pretty successful. As far as steampunk kind of RPG settings, there's one I really like by Sean Carmen called Thunderscape too, which is definitely worth checking out if you guys
I've never
have
heard
not
of that.
played that one. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
I like indie stuff, my friend.
That's good. That must be pretty indie if I haven't heard of it. So, Matthew Sinan is asking me, I guess, what's the best part of the 20th anniversary? Well, the best part of the 20th anniversary is that I'm here. I'm making more money than I ever have. Right, I own a house free and clear, you know, and all of this has been done in spite of all the people who were hoping to get rid of me, you know, and most of those people have been long since forgotten, you know. So that is like, you know, I'm sitting on a throne of their skulls, you know, like I've defeated all my enemies, right? And I really have, like, at this point, the quality of people who come out, I think part of it is social media, right? Since social media exploded, the quality of my enemies has declined so badly. Because before you had to like really make an effort, right? And now it's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and make a mean tweet about you, right? Well, that's not going to do anything, you know? So, you know, it's my success mostly, like, and the fact that my ideas ended up being proven right over and over again, right? Like when the Forge, you know, one of the first people that I fought against was the Forge, the story gaming movement. D&D 4th edition was based on the theories of the Forge, and it was a disaster. It reduced the market for D&D by 2/3, right? And so that's why they came to me for 5th edition. I said, no, you do it like this, right? You make it into the exact opposite of what the Forge says. And it was the most successful edition Wizards of the Coast ever did. Right? So I've been, there's so many times I've gotten to say, I told you so to people. It's very funny. Let's see what else we've got. We've got any other questions here? I'm trying to catch up on the comments. Let's see. Lots of comments. Lots of people talking about Christianity on here, but to each other. Judd Gossling, the secret to the OSR is the friendships we made along the way. Watch Kevin Crawford launch a Steampunk Without Number Kickstarter next year. That's great. We've got a super chat here. So I'm going to flip over to that one right away. Quentin Bauer, $9.99. Quentin Bauer is a great guy. I was a consultant on one of his games. He says, question for both of you. Do you have marketing advice for other indie creatives? I'll let you go first if you like there, John.
I mean, that's such an open-ended question, and it just depends on what you're doing, right? I do got to say, like the most emails I get and what I see of authors and whatnot online is when they're always like, oh yeah, if you're interested in this, check out my book. And if you're just posting, check out my book, check out my book, check out my book, you're not going to build a following very much. People, and this is advice I got from a massive online influencer who's got he's made millions off of his online influencing, has hundreds of thousands of followers, who kind of was I had him just look at my account late last year, and he said the first rule is nobody cares about your book. And that's a tough thing for a lot of people to want to accept and admit. But it's true. Even at, like, I'd say this level, even though the God bless you chat, who a lot of you are talking about my books, on average, you don't want to hear me talk about my books for real. You want to hear me talk about something that is of your interest. And then, you might check out my book, you might read it, but that doesn't mean you want to hear me just endlessly prattle on about my book. And I'd say that's the biggest failing that I see most amateurs kind of getting into way too much all the time. And find a niche that an RPG, if you're into Savage Worlds, be the top Savage Worlds guy, right? And then promote your setting based off of that, right? That's kind of the easiest way to do things, is to find a niche that, like, you can be the guy in, and you can be an RPG pundit, for example, and and then your following will grow. Is my thought.
That's a good answer. So Quentin, thank you very much for that super chat. I'll remind everyone right now, I because apparently people find it annoying, I don't have the live stream monetized while we're still live. So if you want to give me a super chat, that's really great, and I thank you very much for it. It'll go to Domino's Cat Toy Fund. And in terms of your question, I think there are a lot of people who are creatives. I'm guessing it's the same in, like, because I don't write novels, but in novel writing, I'm guessing it's probably the same, that there are people that are like, well, I just have to make like the perfect game or the perfect novel or whatever, right? And then everybody will just buy it, right? And so they make it, they put it out there, and then they expect, if you build it, they will come. And that's not how it works, right? Like, a large part of, obviously you have to have the chops, right, for knowing how to do whatever it is you want to do, whether it's to write a novel or to make an RPG setting or something like that. You have to study and know how to make a coherent product. But you also have to market yourself in a way that you create an audience of people who are fans of you and what you do, right? So part of that does, I think, have to do with explaining some of the stuff, especially with games. Maybe with novels it might be different, but with a game, you have to explain what this product does that other products don't, right? Because there's and normally people are not going to be interested if you just say, oh, well, my game has 13 new character classes, right? That's not enough, right? Like, that's not what they want. They want it to have a spin that allows the game to have an experience that is different. It's not really going to be about the rules and the mechanics. You've got to have good rules and mechanics, but it's got to be something that will make it different from the other 1,000 fantasy RPGs that are out there, right? But to do all that, first you have to get some kind of a presence, right? You have to show up. You have to go on social media. You have to create a specific pocket for yourself of stuff that you specialize in, and get people that are interested in that, and get those people around you. You have to build an audience, and then be interactive with that audience. And obviously you have to like that audience, right? Like, you don't want to be like some of these people on the woke side, right, that seem to hate the people that they're supposedly employed to make products for, right? So you build up an audience of fans, right? And that, depending on what your skills are, it could be all kinds of things, right? In my case, it's by making commentary about the RPG hobby, and people who like the cut of my jib end up liking my games, right? But for other people, it could be something else. You could have a YouTube channel where you paint miniatures or something like that, and then you're going to get the mini guys getting excited about your products too, right? Like, if you make miniature war games or something, right? But the key is you have to create an audience of dedicated fans, and then that will hopefully, by spreading the word, that will expand your your niche, and you have to produce, right? Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's a lot of people think, well, I'm going to make this one product and suddenly I'm going to be living in a mansion with hookers and blow, right? But what really happens in my experience is that if you can make, don't start by making like, this is my magnum opus, right? Start by making little products that are easy for people to get, and not too expensive, and that give it an indication of what you do, and then build up from there. And the more product that you make, the phenomenon known as the long tail means that if you're looking for like actually having steady income from this, the key to that is to be making more product on a constant basis, because your new products are gonna, they're gonna sell. Most of what you earn is going to be in the first few months of a product. But the stuff that you wrote, I've got stuff, that I wrote, what now, 13 years ago, right? That it's still selling. It's not selling very much, right? But every month it makes money, right? And if you've got, I've got, I think at this point, somewhere around 300 products if you count all the PDF products and stuff like that. And all of that ends up accumulating, not just in terms of the income that you make, but in terms of the recognition of your name, right? So you've got to put in that work. And I think that's the key part, and creating a loyal group of people that are interested in what you have to say and what you have to make, right? D&D Dad and Son, who I was on his show not too long ago, he says, John, you should write a setting for Star Adventure. Well, Star Adventure is a rule set. So if you ever decide, pretty much any space opera game, you're probably going to be able to modify the rules for Star Adventure to fit, and it's actually very convenient. I'm always very happy.
That's a really interesting idea. We should talk about that off air at some point, probably.
I'm always super happy. There are a couple of people who've made Star Adventure books, right? Like one guy did I think it was Mass Effect or something. I don't play video games, so I don't know exactly what it was, but he made a modified Star Adventure setting for Mass Effect, right? I think that was the game. And another one that did like stuff where he added like giant robots, right, and stuff. So there's because it's a very bare bones core system, it's very easy to like then add on above that and to alter a few things, and you can make it into all kinds of, if you're doing a sci-fi, classic sort of space opera sci-fi setting, it's a very good thing, and that's I don't charge royalties or anything for that, right? Because it's part of the OGL, right? So if you want to use it, if you want to say it's Star Adventure, as long as it is Star Adventure, or enough of Star Adventure, then I'm probably going to be happy with that. So there you go. If you ever decide that you want to do an RPG of one of your sci-fi games, it's not a bad idea, actually.
It's a good idea.
Okay, this is obviously for you. Does any of the SFWA drama really matter if no one cares about the authors outside their bubbles and no one cares about the awards?
So he's talking about the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, formerly the Science Fiction Writers of America. You notice that change, and those changes are for a couple of reasons. One, science fiction and fantasy, because they of course let fantasy into there, which let more women into the organization, which fundamentally changed the organization. And then suddenly it's not America anymore; it's the association, because they don't like America now. And so they are an organization. They were originally started back in the day. And everybody was in it. Jerry Pournelle was in it. Larry Niven was in it. Harlan Ellison was a part of it. And they were there to really lean on publishers who were screwing authors with contracts and the like, and just make sure that contracts were not going to be, a problem. And the bigger authors were using their weight within the industry to throw around to bully these publishers into not screwing smaller authors. It was actually a good thing. Once it changed, it became a social club on the internet for blue-haired cat ladies. And those blue-haired cat ladies are just extreme leftist bullies who, They're the ones who are posting the rhetoric that that got Charlie Kirk killed. So I'll just call it what it is these days. So they are they've made the club go from something to where, again, it used to be the who's who. Now you would not even recognize anybody who's active in it, like, ever. And so they have gone irrelevant themselves. They banned me in 2018 because I called their president at the time a pedophile defender because she was defending a pedophile on Twitter. And that's literally what they stated. You are not welcome in our club because you called our president a pedophile defender. And it's like, well, she didn't, you didn't say she's not, though. I noticed in this whole thing. But anyway, so is it relevant at this point? Does anybody care about it? There's still an institution within science fiction publishing, and they still carry weight within the mainstream publishers, even though they kind of are useless. So I like to cover it because what they do is always absurd and stupid, and it's funny to laugh at, and it's funny to enjoy, especially when, I'm out selling, all of their board members by leaps and bounds. And they're all LARPing like they're important people. I think that's hilarious, and I love it. And it's like, fine, I'll just keep burning it to the ground. But I do it purely out of entertainment and out of spite. They don't actually do anything. They are not relevant. They don't matter. So it's just an entertaining thing for me. And if you're not entertained by that, it's fine too. So
yeah, RPG awards are very much the same. They're complete jokes.
The Gen Con Awards, like last year, where they banned Zionists or something.
Oh yeah, those were the Indie Awards. I actually got them banned from Gen Con. Right?
You were the one who did it.
I pointed out, right, that technically, because they have this convention hall. It's in,
right.
There are certain rules in that state about what you're allowed or not allowed to do, right? And so if they were essentially banning Jews from attending, right, that would mean that they were in violation of, I think it's Illinois, right? Illinois state law, right? So Indiana, Gen Con said, no, Indiana, my bad. And so they threw them out. Because they couldn't take the risk, right? Gen Con said, no, we're not going to do that, right? So
good work. That's a great scalp.
Now they do it virtually. Yeah. Here's a very important question. Prophetically autistic. Does John smoke a pipe too?
No, occasionally a cigar, but that's it. So.
Cigars are nice too. Yeah, I'm more into pipes, but I don't mind a good cigar once in a while. Let's see if there's anything else here. Otherwise, we'll keep on with my questions. All right. No, I think we're caught up now. So let me see what was the next thing I was going to talk about here. Okay, again, in a similar vein, just for some of the people here who might not have known you until now, you have a YouTube channel. And I noticed that on your YouTube channel, obviously you do talk quite a bit about science fiction, but you also delve a lot into analysis of pop culture. I've seen a lot of your videos about Star Trek and Doctor Who and all that. So again, if you want to tell the audience what they can expect from your YouTube channel.
It's just mostly nerdy stuff, I guess. So if and it's just whatever interests me that week. So I have a lot of interest. I'm big into Star Trek. I'm big into Doctor Who. I'm big into Warhammer. I'm, less big into Star Wars, so I don't cover it as much. But I go into D&D quite a bit and RPG stuff quite a bit. I was covering the deal with Savage Worlds and Deadlands going on earlier this week with the Charlie Kirk situation, which was very unfortunate. And I'm actually friends with Shane Hensley over there. And to his credit, he always has talked to me. But in talking about it, it's like it is very much, if you guys don't know the situation, he posted it was horrific that they, of course he got shot, and a bunch of Troon Army went after him going, Charlie Kirk's a terrible person, rah, we're gonna cancel Deadlands. and he panicked, right?
Yeah.
And so
It's
in the
not the
panic,
first time,
yeah,
by the way, that he's done that, right?
I
Like
know.
yeah. Sorry,
And
go on.
in his panic, he posted that Charlie Kirk caused a lot of harm. And so I'm like, Shane, like, what are you doing? Like, I mean, like, he didn't cause harm. He got shot. He got harmed. This is like,
Yeah.
this is crazy. You can't say this thing, like, just because and he went on a bit of a equivocating sort of deal, and he means well, Shane does, and he's not on their side. But he does have employees, and he's afraid of getting canceled. You could tell,
It's a
and
real
that's a tough spot, right?
yeah.
Because they will
But there,
cancel it. Yeah,
there were a
and so
ton
that
of
was
us
a sad
who
thing.
there was a ton of us who were about to rush in to like take his side, right? And then
Right.
then he goes and does that, right?
And then we can't, right? And it's like, Shane, we can't, and I'm like, I have to cover it because, like, one, I've worked in the Deadlands setting, and done lore for them, so it's like I really, really care about Deadlands, and so that's a big thing for me, and it's just like I have to cover it, and I'm like, Shane, I don't want to cancel you, and I don't want to be unfair to you, but it does suck that you did this, you know. and and he's very nice. He's like, yeah, I understand you're not going to agree with my decision. That's fine. And I'm like, okay, but I'm like, here's the thing, like, Shane. And he tried to explain to me, these people really feel like they're trying to be erased and blah blah blah. You have to feel for them. I'm like, I do not, because like they have to feel like they're being erased. Here's the deal. Like, let's talk about this. What would happen if I attempted to go to Gen Con? Do you think I would be in danger of somebody trying to harm me? And he says, yes. I said, okay. So that's real. They're trying to erase me, correct? I said, so if I went to Gen Con, would I be trying to harm any gay or transgender or whatever? And he goes, no. I said, so that's not happening. So that's all completely in their heads. And in fact, they're trying to erase and harm normal people. And it's weird. And they literally did they shot a guy, right? So like, why would you ever give into that? There's something that's bigger here than your RPG Kickstarter that's going on, and the thing, at some point you have to say enough's enough. But he, like I said, he was kind about it, but he's not gonna do it. And but at least he did admit that, like, these people are dangerous, right? And they would attempt to do harm to me if I tried to show up at Gen Con or whatnot. And that's the unfortunate reality of the RPG industry. And the problem is he knows it, and so he's in the RPG industry. And so it's like, well, if he goes too strong, they're going to attempt to do harm to him and to his employees as well. And it's a tough spot. I don't envy him, but of course, obviously, like, I'm the type of person where I'm like, you know what, this is my values. Screw you. I don't care if I'm blacklisted forever. I'm going to fight as hard as I possibly can. Not everybody has that. And you got to understand that. Like, and you got to be a little sympathetic that not everybody has that will to fight. And so that's why I don't say boycott Savage Worlds or anything like that. He means well. He is on our side. He just won't, he just doesn't want to fight. And
I mean, I know a lot of people like that.
It's his prerogative. Yeah, it's his
Well,
prerogative. So
talking about 20 years, right? Like, there was a long time
Right.
when I was the only guy who would publicly say stuff, right? And like, I remember that for like the first half of my career as the RPG pundit, right? The whole time I was blogging and stuff like that. Gradually there started being a few other people who started making some of the same commentary. But what I used to get tons and tons of people writing to me in private, including some very well-known game designers, who would be like, yeah, I agree with everything you've said and everything that you're talking about. But I couldn't say it, I can't,
Right.
But and then they would sometimes
there's ones that have gone way further. And I'll call a few of them out. There's Steve Jackson Games. Steve Jackson, what I don't know what happened to the guy, but
disappointing,
he was a Republican. He was a conservative guy.
He stood up to the FBI,
yeah,
he was
really, like, for real, right?
And then he got arrangement syndicate.
And it's just bizarre. And he's not been the same. And it's not just like he has his political stance. He posts these deranged rants from the Steve Jackson page, like, and it's crazy. Another big equivocator is AEG, Alderac Entertainment. And they're mostly out of the RPG space at this point. What they do is they used to do Legend of the Five Rings, Seventh Sea, Spycraft, if you remember that one. And they're gone out of RPGs. Like I said, they mostly do what they do is they take kind of semi-popular board games and then kind of take the rule set and then paste a generic setting on it and run a Kickstarter now. Really boring stuff. So they're not really stuff I'm going to buy anyway, but those guys have equivocated big time too, and actually gone further to try to like blacklist people and etc. So those two companies are much more places I'd direct fire at than Pinnacle Entertainment Group, right? Because Shane's reacting to social pressure. What we need to do is make sure he sees that the social pressure is a lot harder on those who try to hurt us than anything else. And I think Shane will eventually just roll back around is really what's going to happen. Yeah, there's my tactical. It's tactical, guys. We're gamers. Let's win.
I've been saying for years, right? Like from maybe at least since 2012 or so, that the real, and definitely since 2014, that the thing that we need to do in terms of those of us who deal in pop culture and so on is to have these corporations and these institutions be more afraid of us than they are of the left, and a long time people, oh no, Pundit, you can't talk like that, right? Whatever, right? Like it's because then you're doing what they're doing, right? I'm like, no, that's what you have to do, right? Like it's the only way that works, right? If they're more worried about that we're going to cost them more than the left could possibly cost them, that's the only way. Because they're already going to be inclined to the left because of the infiltration into the corporations that have come from the universities, So we can't win that in an internal battle. We have to win it by external pressure, right? And only in the last few years has that really been starting to happen, right? When you start having corporations losing untold millions of dollars, right? Bud Light and so on, like that from actual campaigns that are hurting them where it counts, and I think now we're really getting to the place where, because and you have a couple of these milquetoast conservatives, right? Like James Lindsay or whatever that are complaining, now the right likes cancel culture. It's like, no, what we're doing is they created the rules. We use those rules against them.
We're using the rules. That's right.
One of the number one rules of political warfare.
And I'll note, they haven't gotten around and brought one of us into their fold or unblacklisted us or anything like that. No. That's still going on. It's not like they had an epiphany that they're pro free speech now and they're going to be like, I haven't gotten any apologies from any of these people.
Colbert and Jon Stewart and all these guys who are complaining about what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, right? Not one of them. They say, oh, they're going after comedians now. Well, where the fuck were you when they went after Roseanne Barr? No, none of you stopped. You all were happy that she was gone, right? So it has nothing to do with free speech on their side. It has to do with them keeping on to power, right? Them holding on to power. That's all that they're doing, right?
Absolutely.
No, that's not the one I wanted. Nope, not that one either. There, that one. Fear is the start of wisdom. Yeah, actually, it's fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
That's right.
Yeah, but there we are. So let's carry on here. Before I do want to talk more about politics, but before that, let's bring you into now the context of RPGs. So tell us a bit about what's your history with RPGs, and what interests you about them, and what
I started playing D&D with my buddies when I was like 16, 17. And then I migrated more into I came more from the collectible card game sort of side of things. So I played Magic, L5R, Star Trek, the customizable card game, primarily, but I dabbled in some others too. And so there was a lot of overlap between those two because those card games are almost storytelling in some ways, right? And so the way they're set up, it's, you're dueling wizards, to play, putting your armies out and the like. And so you kind of have a little bit of that going on. And of course, Magic had a very similar setting to D&D, and L5R had its own RPG setting, which I then discovered later on. And I did that, and I would do, and then I found like a bunch of like Star Trek online chat like RPGs, which were totally narrative based, where there'd be a person who kind of controls the story, and everybody would play their little part on the ship, and you do your little thing and try to come up with your techno babble to solve the crisis, and it was a lot of fun, right? And so I do a lot of that, and eventually that migrated into me because it was difficult to find people to play with at home online. I'd play in. I found a Legends of the Five Rings chat called Five Rings Online, which was really big, and actually GM'd that for a while. And gosh, they had over 100 players, so it was a nightmare to manage. And I also worked in the World of Darkness unmoderated chat, which was a nightmare on a different level because World of Darkness players are degenerates.
Yeah.
But
They always
you would
back in
open up.
I don't know what year you started in, right? But I was gaming before there was Vampire and everything, and then there was a sea change that happened when Vampire, the original Vampire RPG came out, and then they started doing like live action Vampire, right? The live the LARPing version of it, right?
But
Because
I was the hunter GM. Which was always challenging because the hunters wanted to go PK everybody else, and it was a shared world thing, and so you had to like manage it to where they wouldn't be PKing people. So when you weren't running scenes and things like that, and it was a little tough. But the thing is, like you with your GM powers, you'd kind of be watching, and we had like an invisible like power within the chat, so we could watch the chats just for weird stuff to get rid of people who were doing weird stuff. Oh my gosh. I mean, there was the vampire players all like to use I think I'm trying to remember the rules at this point. I think the power is called Majesty, to force other players to it's a mind control thing. And so they could quote seduce them, and they'd like try to force them into like it was like basically running rape scenarios, and I'm like, no. And of course we banned those people immediately, but they'd keep doing that kind of thing. It would come up all the time, and with Mage, we found one people when we were hiding as our GMs, where like they were turning they were turning people into animals to have bestiality role play session. We banned them too. I mean, it's just like it was so like when I say World of Darkness players are degenerates, they're degenerates. But I very
what I was getting to is that when Vampire came out, when Vampire Live, the Theater of Darkness or whatever the fuck they called it, I forget its name now. When that came out, right? Like I was already a D&D gamer, and there were a bunch of us that were D&D gamers, and that was when I was in university at that point, and we discovered that going to these live vampire games was an incredibly good way to score with very loose goth chicks, right? So like so you could always tell, right? Because we'd be we'd be the most normal vampires in the room, right? Like Ventrue or whatever, right?
Yeah, you're like the alpha in that situation because you get all these gross vampire players.
It was easy pickings, man. Because the rest of the ones that were there, the guys that were there because they were into vampire,
they were smelly.
Half of them
were smelly.
Right? Half of them were gay, and then the rest of them were just really weird. Right? So the D&D gamers, who by that time, this was past the time when D&D was super popular. So by then, we were still basically nerds, right? But we were like a whole degree of social acceptability above most of the actual male, vampire LARPers. So it was a good time.
So I eventually parlayed that. I parlayed that eventually. I GM'd the AEG, the Legend of the Five Rings, like official forum game, which is kind of interesting because those official forum games and the way L5R worked was it was an evolving setting, and the card game often you know, for the card game, and this is what made it fun to be a big card game person, which is where I came onto the game for. If you win a tournament, you get to pick a story choice, like and change the course of the story based on your playing, and that was kind of neat. And so they were trying to add that in with the RPG, with the forum games, and they were going to have the forum game impact the story as well, and then that would get written into a supplement book, which was great. So I GM'd that game too. Again, that was a couple hundred players, so it was just a nightmare to do because there was just too much going on. But it was still fun. And I attempted to get on the story team from that point. I tried out, and they put me on the Doomtown Reloaded card game story team instead. And so that, which is the Deadlands setting. And so that's where I got to write for the Deadlands setting. Yeah, and it was pretty cool. So I've got printed official product with my name on it, and that was some of my first paid writing stuff, which was really cool. So that's kind of my RPG background. I'm all over the map of these like tier 2, tier 3 games that, you know, many people have heard of, but they're on the smaller side. Yeah.
And do you play any RPGs right now, or?
I have no time anymore. No. So I save. I just write. And so my writing is my RPG time, and I long for it some days. I'm like, it's you don't get the fun social interaction of it, but at the same time, having GM'd a lot of games, players ruin every story. And so they just do every single time. They'll come up with something to ruin it. And so you will not get your story done the way you want it to, which is frustrating.
That's the thing, right? RPGs are not made to be like novels or movies, right? Or something. And a lot of DMs make that mistake. They think that's what it is. No, you've got to make it. It's a virtual world, right? It's a virtual world where it will not follow necessarily the literary pattern. It's what's called story after, not story before, right? Story before is you have a plot, you think it's going to go like this, right? It's going to have the first act, second act, the climax, the denouement, etc., right? And you want all that to happen, right? But this is not like that. It's like if you're going fishing or if you're going to play golf, right? You don't go to fish because you want to have a really good story, right? You go and fish, and maybe something happens, and then you tell the story of what happened.
I know.
It's not.
So it's a very different thing, but at the same time, like, you know, this is a career now, so it's like that's what I'm focusing on. You know, the last time I went back and was kind of GMing some games, which was probably 2022. I realized, like, you know, I had already had First Team and Country become a bestseller at that point, and I had maybe 10 books out and a couple of I think that's when I got Overmind kickstarted, and like that Kickstarter made like 30 grand that time, and that was like my biggest at the time. And I was like, why am I spending hours and hours doing these freebie stories, like, you know, and, you know, doing these RPG collaborate? I need to just spend my time writing for real. And so at that point, I just cut it off and said, I'm just going to do this kind of solitary thing. So I want to see Lord Sathar says, and I hope I pronounced that right, said he used to do 5 Rings Online when it was add-on chat. I would like to know what your character was, because I was in that add-on. I played every iteration of 5 Rings Online. I love Legend of the 5 Rings. So be interested to hear who you are, and then contact me if I know who you are.
There you go. You can get in touch with them in private if you don't want to say it in public.
Sure. Yeah, please do. I'm on X. You can DM me. So,
there you go.
Cool.
All right. Well, you already brought up the topic of Charlie Kirk, and I've seen so much. Well, obviously, we've seen so many people on social media, particularly, you know, different degrees of celebrities that have been misbehaving there, and some of them have gotten themselves canceled, and then, you know, and then also, like, obviously people in positions of public trust that have now gotten canceled. It's really, you know, I think it's great because, you know, when they say, oh, you know, this teacher, you know, said that they were happy that Kirk was killed, and now they've lost their job. The only thing I think is, okay, that's good. Now we just need to find another way to fire another million of these people, and then we're going to be good, right?
Like, I know, right? Yes, I know. How many people have you gotten fired today? But what's interesting is I've been waiting to see something come out of D&D and Wizards of the Coast, because
Yeah, they have
but
been
they've been
super
so
disciplined
silent.
about it. I'm
Yeah,
really surprised, right? Like none of the big gaming companies have fucked up that right yet. And I mean, in the case of D&D, it might be because they don't have like anyone left, right? Like they fired almost everybody in their design team now. So like the people that are left are actually like the corporate guys, right? And then there are these nobodies that don't have enough of a social media presence. Maybe some of them did say something and none of us noticed, right? But I'm surprised in general that like there haven't been any. Well, there's been one, right? There's been one that I can think of offhand, which is Grim Jim, who used to be
right.
one of my co-hosts on my previous show, Inappropriate Characters, right? He was always
I
a
saw
lefty.
your video.
Yeah, he was always a lefty, but then he went crazy, right? And,
Yeah.
because he has been resoundingly attacked for that. You can't really cancel Grim Jim though, because like he lives in England and he lives off the dole. So like you can't fire him. He doesn't work, So
Right.
one thing I noticed on, and I think maybe you did a video about this. I've seen so many videos lately these last few days they kind of get muddled in my head. But there was the guy that played Tuvok, right? Who, he made this post with a picture with a meme saying this is the only Kirk that matters, and it showed Captain Kirk, right? And,
which was after he made even worse comments than that.
Oh yeah.
That was not even nearly the worst of it. But always, this is the thing, and so if this is the laws of SJW physics, is SJWs always lie, SJWs always double down, and SJWs always project, right? So they're going to do it. They're never going to just back off and be like, oh, that was stupid of me to celebrate somebody's death. No, they're going to do it again. Because this is their ethos, and they just want to go for it. And
the really dumbass thing about what this guy did, though, specifically with that Kirk image, is that William Shatner is still alive, right? And William Shatner posted on X, saying that he is saddened by the death of Charlie Kirk and has something about consolation or best wishes or something like that to Kirk's widow and children, right? Like so the Tuvok here tries to use the image of Captain Kirk in an anti Charlie Kirk post, and William Shatner basically got him to fuck off, right? Like he said, no, I don't buy it. He's one of the good ones, That guy's a national treasure, like William Shatner. He's like 90 something now. It's crazy. But it's good that he's still around, So I'm very happy that finally the right wing has learned how to cancel people, because it seems to be really effective right now. Let's hope that keeps up. Like one of the things I'm worried about is that for all the fervor, like today, 300,000 people at the commemoration there, but there's a chance that after a few weeks that could die down and there could be, that could be lost. So we've got to keep up the momentum. Though I'm very impressed. I don't know, did you see Steve Miller's speech today?
Oh yeah, he was
holy shit,
fiery yet peaceful, for sure.
I mean, Steve Miller could be an excellent president if he didn't look like a goblin.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like,
unfortunately, I look at him and I say, no, that guy could never win an election. Right? He looks. It's just not. It's not going to happen, right? Like, but he's going to be an excellent consigliere to JD Vance, or something like that. The man, but he's
really
going to be like, he's going to be the brains behind. Well, I mean, JD Vance.
He's a good behind the scenes guy, and not everybody's the face sort of thing. Anyway, they're different jobs. But yeah, he's you're never going to get a bald looking guy like that as president. It's just not going to happen. So
no, it's just. I mean, well, you could get a bald guy, but he'd have to be like a tough looking bald guy or something like that.
You got to have a beautiful head of hair like Donald Trump. Beautiful hair, the best hair, believe me.
Yeah, I mean, having good hair is remarkably important in most cases for political future, right?
Right.
But you could, in theory, you could have a guy who was, like a Tom Homan type, right, or something like that, right? He might not have to be. He could be ugly, but if he looks tough, then that would be okay, right? But Miller's kind of short, he's like I say, he's got kind of goblin-esque features. I love the guy, right? But I don't think he can make it. There wouldn't be enough plastic surgery in the world to get him to be presidential. But he could be, like a Kissinger type. He could be like the genius behind the administration.
Right.
And he's so loyal, right? Like he was one of the only guys that in Trump's first term lasted all 4 years, right? And now he's back, and he's probably going to last all 4 years again.
Right.
So
we can only hope. So
yeah, cool. That speech. If you guys have not heard, any of you in the audience have not heard Miller's speech at the memorial for Kirk, you take a look. As soon as we're done here, go and look it up.
Yeah, it was great. Excellent.
Yeah,
Tucker was excellent too. So
I didn't catch his, but I'm guessing he was pretty good. I was surprised. He hosted yesterday, I think it was. He hosted the Charlie Kirk show. They've been getting like other famous pundits to not RPG pundits, but political pundits to host that show for the last couple of weeks. Cool. Right? The guy from the Daily Wire did it. A whole bunch of other people did it, and yesterday was Tucker's turn. And I was just stunned that he managed to go like a whole 2 hours without mentioning Israel once. I thought at this point it was an impossible addiction for him. But he did it. He controlled it. He did really well, actually. He made a very good show. So the left wing has been in a total tailspin about this, and it's funny that now they're trying to rally around this whole thing of Jimmy Kimmel being canceled, right? Like, you realize that Jimmy Kimmel in 2014, with the 25 to 50-year-old 49 or whatever demographic, he was getting an average of 1 million viewers. And this year, as in like this past month, that number was down to 125,000, right? There are a lot of crazy YouTube guys that have like 10 times that, right? So like, it wasn't, in this case, it was a no-brainer for the company, right? It was costing them at the very least tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? Because he wasn't getting ratings, right? None of these guys are getting ratings except for Greg Gutfeld, right? Like, he's the only late night guy because he's the only one that can be actually funny because he's conservative, right? So he can say things that none of the other guys can say. The left has completely lost its sense of humor. And that's one of the most important things, right? Like, comedy and music were for so long dominated by the left. And now, well, there's still a lot of leftist influence in music, but in comedy, they've completely lost it because their own rules doesn't allow them to say anything actually funny, right?
I'm like, some people were shaming me over Jimmy Kimmel. Oh, now you're for cancel culture. I'm like, you know what? As soon as you uncancel Owen Benjamin, I will take you seriously.
Yeah.
And Owen got just absolutely shut out of Hollywood, shut out of everything. And so
a whole bunch of other people too.
The minute he gets back, I will take them seriously. That like, this is we better play both sides, and I'm supposed to.
Celebrities said nothing.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't say nothing.
Right.
Some of them cheered when Gina Carano was canceled from Star Wars,
right?
And basically ruined The Mandalorian after that. Like, it was never the same after.
It really wasn't, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the turning point for that. Like, the show was great until that moment, and then it very quickly went downhill. So yeah. And then the other phenomenon that's very interesting to me in this is that you have this this faction of the anti-Israel right, and they are eating themselves right now. Like, they're devouring themselves. They're fighting amongst each other, right? Like, and it's all because, of course, Charlie Kirk was very, very pro-Zionist, right? He was
backing off that the last few months.
Well,
because Israel's done some pretty bad things.
he
So,
had been making certain specific criticisms about the state of Israel or the management of the war, which were not the ones that a lot of people are claiming he was saying, right? Because there's,
right.
people were saying, oh yeah, he was opposed to the genocide of the Palestinians. That's not true, because that doesn't exist, right? But like there's audio of Charlie Kirk saying, like, I used to tell the gays for Palestine, the queers for Palestine, that they would throw them off a tall building if they were ever in Gaza, but now Gaza doesn't have any tall buildings, right? That wasn't the thing. He was criticizing their some of their policy regarding how they are managing the war, right? Like, which a lot of people are. I mean, Ben Shapiro has. I just saw a clip the other day. He was criticizing the fact that the second that you put two things into equal priority that are not compatible in warfare, you're going to lose, right? And Israel has done that. It's put rescue the hostages and defeat Hamas. You can't make both of those the top priority, right? And that is why they've been dithering for 2 years. And also the failure of Israel's government to like make the real case of why they have to fight this war, right? They shouldn't be saying, well, we have to fight this war to rescue the hostages. They should be saying, we have to fight this war because Hamas has proven themselves to be an unbelievable evil on the world, like that's, and honestly, they've completely misunderstood the way the rest of the West thinks, right? Apart from Israel, right? That in the West, nobody likes a long war, right? If Israel had gone in and had completely wiped out Hamas in 2 weeks, even if they'd had like the same casualty figures that they have now, everybody would have thought, oh, well, that was really good, and then they would forget about it, right? The problem is when you just let it drag on and on, the longer that you're fighting a war, the more unpopular that war gets, right? It happened in every American war since Korea, right? And that's and it's the same for the Europeans and everything. Right? Meanwhile, Canada,
it's pretty ugly over there. I don't know. I'm not in the rah-rah Israel camp. So
well, I kind of am, but I don't actually want to have that debate with you. What I want to point out is that all of these guys, at some point or another, right? Candace, not Tucker, but that's probably because he has he had a very close friendship with Charlie Kirk. But Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, Dave Smith, and obviously Nick Fuentes, all of them had done videos attacking Charlie Kirk, right? And so the second Charlie Kirk dies, they're all in a tailspin to find a way to not end up having that blow back on them, right? And so suddenly you've got, guys like Candace Owens and Ian Carroll are going down with the ship. They switch to this, the Jews murdered Charlie Kirk. It's all a conspiracy, right? And it looks really bad for them. And then on the other side, you have like Dave Smith made a video against Ian Carroll, right? He said, oh no, you guys are just crazy now. You've gone too far, right? He never said that before. He was comedian Dave Smith was always on board with everything that these guys said, and now all of a sudden he's like, no, that's just crazy talk, right? And even Nick Fuentes is like, no, we loved Charlie Kirk, right? And this is like they're all tying themselves in knots about it, right? So I think that I know you probably are not on the same boat as I am in that perspective, but as a guy who had pretty much the exact same opinions that Charlie Kirk had, I have to say I'm kind of happy about that too, right? Like if they were gaining a lot of momentum and now they kind of look like idiots,
Yeah,
some of them backtrack
like,
on it. They do great.
Charlie, Charlie was so effective in what he did, and it did sway the election in 2024.
Oh, enormously,
so
yeah.
big. Like, I mean, it was moronic. It was moronic to like oppose what he's doing, and if you
don't want to cross him because he was the only real the real coalition, right? Like a whole bunch of these guys on the right, on the MAGA right, and whether whatever your views on Israel are, all of those things, there are a whole bunch of these people that can't stand each other. Charlie Kirk was the one guy that talked to all of them, right? And that's actually the thing that might be like the biggest cost, right? If no one else, like if the people that are now in charge at Turning Point can't maintain that without Charlie, then that's really going to lose something for the whole conservative movement.
I think they will, because at this point,
So.
I mean, at this point you have he's literally a martyr at this point. Literally.
Yeah.
This, and I'm not using this in a pejorative kind of way. This is a actual martyr that's out here. And when you have an actual martyr, I think the cause supersedes anything else. And I think I really think we do have a turning point. I hate to say that, that's going on here, because you can't fight that kind of tide. Which is a good thing, because they are doing, there may be some things I mildly disagree with or whatever, but they are doing like 90% of what I want and what everybody else wants. And so that's the best you're ever going to get in politics. If you want to succeed in politics, you can go you can be a hardliner and never compromise. And that's how you become the Libertarian Party, only get 3% of the vote, right? So that's just that's the reality. So right.
Yeah. No, well, I do think that there's the opposite possibility, is that Charlie Kirk's death could lead to there being now 1 million Charlie Kirks, right? Like that there's going to be, like, apparently there's, like, right now at least, there's a huge upswing in people that want to start Turning Point branches in schools, and and whatever the version is, I forget what they call it now. It used to be also Turning Point, but they changed the name, in high schools and things like that. There's this one story that came out of there's this teacher in a school. I forget where it is, but it's one of the Democrat states, right? And this guy in class had again, he'd said how he was, how Charlie Kirk deserved what he got, or something like that, right? And some parents found out about this. They complained to the school board. The school said, we're not going to do anything about that, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? And so what happened is the kids walked out. They walked out of the school, right? They started protesting, right? So that is something that gives me enormous hope, right? Because even if that guy doesn't get fired, we've got the kids, right? The future belongs to us, like they're already finished, and I think that's going to be, like, it is a counterculture moment, and the counterculture at this moment has completely flipped, right? It used to be that counterculture was left, now it is right, because the establishment has been right for the last 10 years at least, right?
That's right.
Probably it was left, right? It was becoming more and more lefty for years, right, since the 90s. But at one point there, it became the case where, like, somebody who started kindergarten 10 years ago has never, ever had a person in authority over them who was conservative. There was no church lady. There was no, guy who doesn't believe in evolution. There was no guy who was, like, anti-LGBT being their math teacher or something like that. No, none of those, right? Like, everybody who has ever oppressed them, everybody who's ruined the games they like, or the TV shows they like, or who has told them that they couldn't say certain words, all of the people that have been the man to these kids was on the left. And I think that they've suddenly realized, oh, hey, guess what? We can go the opposite way.
I've got kids. Really, I've got kids that are 17 and 12, and so I would say that that's the case. The boys have all kind of fallen into that, for sure.
But
the girls have not, though. The girls are pretty indoctrinated, and that's the real divide that's happened at this point. Which is
the problem is that boys have been told their entire lives that they're bad because they're boys, right? And girls have been told their entire life that they're perfect because they're girls, right? So obviously, it'll take a particularly more clever type of girl to break out of that programming, because they're being flattered, right? And probably only life experience will lead them to think that maybe they were led astray by being told that they don't have to do anything, and they can and that they're still going to be, that they don't have to do anything, and they can still be perfect, right? They can do whatever they want and still be perfect, right? Whereas boys, like they were just asking for it, right? There's a 40. Charlie Kirk was largely responsible for a 44% shift from left to right in Gen Z youth between 2020 and 2024.
That's right.
It's crazy. All right, so topics here. I don't see any new questions. There's some new comments here, but none. Where is that? We need a modern U.S. president with Malay here. I love I live right next door to Argentina, and Uruguay is a weird country because it is leftist. It has a very big government, but it's a very mild and non-retarded version of leftism compared to any other South American country. Right? Like they appropriate money for themselves, but they don't try to like steal property or shit like that. They don't nationalize.
How did you end up there, if you don't mind? I'm very curious about that.
Well, there was a point in time where I was e-working at a very early period of time, right? Like from like 2000, what would that have been? 2002, long before most people did, and so I realized when that happened was that, I could actually like travel and work at the same time, right? I didn't have to be in any particular place, right? So then I spent a couple of years traveling to different places in the world with the thought of being, like kind of like what do they call it now? A digital nomad, right? I was just going to stay for a while in different places, right? And so I've traveled in different places in Canada, different places in the United States, Europe, and then I went down to South America, right? I have Latino ancestry, and I went to a lot of places that I really enjoyed, right? That I thought were wonderful, right? I lived in London for a while, lived in Paris, in New York, New Orleans, lots of places as a visitor, right? Really temporary. But and then I got to Montevideo, and I really liked a number of things about it. Right, is that it's a fairly metropolitan city, but it's not super big. It has a very low crime rate. At the time, I would say it had a low crime rate for South America. Today, it has a lower crime rate than most U.S. cities, right? Because most U.S. cities have gone terribly bad in crime, right? And it has all of the kind of European charm of like maybe some smaller cities in like Iberia or Italy, right? But it's economically it is vastly less expensive, right? And so I just said, oh, you know what? I'm gonna stay here, because also Uruguay has an aging population, and it has very low population growth, and so they have very low bars to being a resident, right? And it's very easy to come here, right? Like and it has it doesn't have a good welfare state or anything like that, so it doesn't get like it actually recently it's had a whole bunch of people that have come from Venezuela and some that have come from Cuba, but they come here to work, right? Because they're not going to live off the dole here, right? The dole is useless for them. So that works, right? And now more recently, like in when was that? In 2010 or so, they like put fiber optic cable all over the country, right? So you have very high speed internet. So then a whole bunch of foreigners came, expats from first world countries came to live here because you can do almost anything if you're working. If your job is through a computer, it's actually the infrastructure for it is there, and so I decided to stay. And originally my plan was, well, I'll stay for a couple of years, right? But then I just kept staying because I kept liking it. And then eventually I bought a house, with some D&D money, So that's basically the reason I ended up here. And I love it. I especially, I wouldn't go back now because every year Canada gets worse, Like I said, just today, the Prime Minister of Canada recognized the state of Palestine. Tomorrow, he plans to recognize the state of Mordor because we're making up imaginary. Why not? They're both fantasy countries, and you might as well. That's not the only problem with Canada, of course, but it's just one of so many, to say nothing of England. Somebody here
Interesting.
put Grim Chim seems like he can't decide if he wants to be an Alan Moore clone or Stevie Nicks. Well, the other day, it was on Diversity and Dragons channel, somebody had said that he looks like zombie Alan Moore, which is kind of true. All right, let's see. Let me catch up here on the comments if there's any questions. All right, no. I would like to, if you've still got time here, to talk about basically, first of all, your faith, and
Sure.
second, about this book that you've written called Churchianity. So
Yeah, sure.
You can start off however you want to.
I was raised Catholic and then ended up at various sort of modern American churches over the last 20 years, which I went to a Protestant Christian school through high school. And so from there, I ended up at some of the larger churches that were popping up that were getting popular because of the cool bands and the coffee and the like. And I was a part of those for a long, long time. And so 2020 rolls around and I'd been volunteering for a lot of years, and the pastor starts holding up white fragility at the pulpit. If you don't know what white fragility is, it's a book. It's an anti-white person book, and it's like, what's going on here? And starts posting, taking a knee like the NFL players on Instagram, and it's like, okay, this is getting out of control. And of course, this was during the COVID lockdown, so was doing it without anybody there for the online group. And I think they just went off the rails during that point because, and I noticed that, like, okay, well, if there's no real authority, it's very easy to go off the rails. And so I turned back to Catholicism at that point, and then started taking my family back to the Catholic Church. And I was like, okay, this is structured. It has not changed. It will not change, and this is great. And at the time, I wrote a letter to my church, and I started writing because I'd been very, very heavily involved, and I thought, I need to write a warning about what happens when you have this whole system out here, which is the modern sort of American church. And the modern American church is really revolving around a pastor being a cool guy and giving you a fun time on a Sunday, like a concert or something like that. And it's about a social environment.
The evangelical churches are terrible for that.
It's like about it's more about a social environment than it's about than it is about worshiping God and actually humbling yourself. And I noticed that right away, like as a person who was on the stage playing keyboards before 2,000 or 3,000 people every weekend. I mean, I was pretty hype on that, and I definitely get a giant adrenaline rush every week and feel great. And there's a point where I'm like, wow, I mean, a lot of the bands I listen to don't play before this many people.
What was that famous quote from Hank Hill, right? He says, that Christian rock isn't making rock any better, it's just making Christianity worse. Is that how it goes?
True. Absolutely true. And so then I go into the Catholic Church and I realized, like, well, the musicians aren't really the front and center. They're not and all of it is about humbling yourself. And it's all about, immediately you walk in the door and it's Lord have mercy. It's like, well, this is a little better. We're actually acknowledging sin, which we couldn't talk about, in the other deal, like, ever. And this is a way, this is just a much better way to be, because if everybody's brought into humility together, then we are, it actually creates a much better environment and actually a much better culture. And so I started formulating just my book on this, right? What's that?
If I can interrupt you for a second, can I ask you something? So you went back to Catholicism.
Yes.
But did you have to shop around for Catholic churches? Because in my experience, especially in North America, there are very significant differences among many Catholic dioceses, where some of them, there's a ton of them that are as much into the whole social justice thing as any Protestant church is, or sometimes more.
What's interesting is you might have a priest do
there's a
that in
lot of
their
leftism
homily,
in
right?
Catholicism in North America.
Yeah, you might have a priest do that in their homily or whatever, but the way that it's structured is the homily's not really the most important part of it, and
Yes.
that's very different than the Protestant church, where the guy's message is all you're there for, really. Like his pep talk TED talk, and it is always a TED talk these days, is what everybody's there for, and so the weight is different, and while they do their full readings, and so it's like, okay, and that's very structured. He gives his little 5-10 minute talk, and it's like, okay, well, I mean, if he says something stupid, he just says something stupid. That's not the point. He's not, it doesn't matter. The sacraments are still coming, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a very different, I hate to use the word because it's so modernistic, but it's a very different vibe, right?
Yeah. I can understand how at the individual level, and if what and obviously if you're a Catholic, the thing that matters is the sacrament of the communion, right?
Right.
But I do, there is certainly been a lot of leftism that has been institutionalized in the Catholic Church. And it's one thing is obviously the previous pope was awful, but there have been a lot of awful popes.
They say that, but I started researching that at the time too, and every time a big headline would come up about Pope Francis and he's making all priests wear pride colors, it ends up not being true. And I would find out that
the media was bad about
enough,
that.
yeah.
But hang on, after the Benedict, right? The
Right.
next conclave, what they were looking for was a guy who knew how to manage the media, because what they didn't want was any more bad press. They didn't want anything more about like banking scandals or molestation charges or things like that, right? And in fact, they picked the perfect guy for that in a way, because I mean, I know this guy because he was the cardinal of Argentina, right? And so he was very well known in South America for years before that, right? He got into big fights with both the right and the left in Argentina, because of course the left was very extremely anti-clerical, but the right was very critical in many. He was very critical in many ways of them, because the clergy themselves in Argentina were still very much in this. They still have a very strong streak of the kind of liberation theology movement, right?
Right.
But what this guy was a master of, because he was in that boiling pot of Argentina with the Kirchneristas and the right, and then himself, he knew how to manipulate media, right? And so he would go and say
kind
things
of
like,
at the same time he would do it, but if you listen to his stuff, he also was a guy who just loved to just ramble.
He did, yeah.
And he would just process by talking, and the media would take like this like one phrase, like,
yeah,
and
but
then hone in on that. But it's like, wait a minute, he wasn't actually saying that.
He throws a bone to them about something about environmentalism,
right,
or how the gays are okay or whatever, right? And they're going to go nuts about it, and then they're not going to be attacking the church, which is what they did constantly during Benedict's term, right? Because Benedict didn't know how to talk to them at all, right? So he was there for that. He didn't actually change very much of anything internally in the church, right?
Correct.
But he did in the parts of the Curia. He was obviously very favorable to people who had his own kind of political views, right? Which was, we'll see what the new guy is like. But anyways, my point is that what's going on at the level of the papacy doesn't necessarily matter much to the individual diocese.
No, and ours is I mean, I wouldn't say that like ours is like ours is a pretty big church, and so we've got 3 priests, and one I could tell is pretty dang liberal, but he's not. He's kind of that harmless kind of liberal, and the main guy is younger, and he seems pretty solid. So not terribly worried about it. But like I said, like the way that mass is structured and all that, it doesn't quite matter as much as the way that it is structured in these kind of TED Talk churches, right? So that's why I decided to write a book about, and I've been working on it for a few years. And I was just nervous about it because I'm like, who am I to do something like this? And to your point earlier, it's like you were talking about somebody like, a lot of RPG designers, like they want to make the perfect game before they put it out. There's
Yeah.
something to that, because and I kind of was feeling this. I'm like, well, this isn't me like making a thing about like, laser swords and, warp drives, like,
Yeah.
where I'm just having fun anymore. This is important. And so I want to be
I
careful
assume
about it.
you
Yeah.
need to do research, right? You have to actually
Right.
study it. Yeah.
So there's quite a bit, but a lot of it comes down to what I've known, and it all ties in anyway. Like, I mean, social justice is the problem. It does start with Marxism, and so there's historical elements there. There's some other parts to it that maybe a lot of people don't know, regarding mega churches and Joel Osteen and a thing called prosperity doctrine, which has really
Yeah,
radicalized America in a bad
prosperity
way.
gospel,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so I hit on that pretty hard, and then I just give my own experiences regarding things as well, and so that's what ends up being in churchianity, and it's been resonating really, really well. So I've gotten a lot of great compliments and good reviews on it.
Yeah.
So I guess I did a good thing.
Now,
So
so is this basically a book that is going after American Protestantism? Like, is it?
I wouldn't say
Are you
all, because
suggesting this is a problem only there? Because I mean, I've certainly seen some Catholic dioceses that will also have, they can't, again, because of the stricture of the Mass, as you pointed out, they can't go all out in the same way, right? Where they just
right.
transform it into like a rave or something, right? But there is a lot of that same influence there. It's just somewhat muted by the, which is a very good point that you make about by the necessity of the structure of the Mass.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I have a lot of hardline Tradcath fans, and I've got a lot of I guess more on the Protestant fans as well. And I wanted to be a little careful to where I wasn't just condemning everybody's church, because at the same time, like, the message of Christ is important, and if you look at it, even the Catholic Church, if you were baptized in a Protestant church, they still count it. Like, it doesn't. If you're baptized and you're coming to Christ, you're coming to Christ. They don't like differentiate on that level. Now, I do think there are better ways than others, but at the end of the day, I don't think that God differentiates between like a soul of a person who was in a Lutheran church versus this, and splits hairs on that, because that'd be it just doesn't seem just, right? And if there's one thing God is, he's just,
Well,
right? And so
modern day Lutheran is in a lot of trouble. I don't know if you saw this.
I'm just I'm generalizing, right? But
I know you can see, but this is a picture that just came out recently of 3 Lutheran ministers. I think one of them is a bishop, right? And they're talking about social justice and stuff like that in the Lutheran church. They just did a promotional video telling you to.
But I didn't want to discount somebody's faith and salvation, but I want to say, look, going more traditional is never a bad thing, and you should look at it, and you should look at the sacraments and like why they've been used historically by Christians for thousands of years, and why would you abandon that only in the last 150 years? Why would you think that we know better now, being this far from Christ, than say these Christians for the last couple thousand years? So that's kind of the take I take with it.
Well, it isn't something that's just been abandoned in the last 150 years, though. Right? I
mean, from a popular standpoint, yeah, it really is, right?
Well, it starts with the Reformation, right? And that's at the beginning of the 16th century, right? So it's a bit more like 400 years or so, right?
I wouldn't say that was as
some of the sacraments, right? But it depends, right?
It depends, sure.
And there's the debate on transubstantiation, all that sort of thing. Like some of them will still, give bread and wine or bread and grape juice if you're a Baptist, right? At the in the service, but they'd say, well, this is symbolic. It's not the literal body and blood of Christ, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's a really long-term debate, right? And part of it has to do with sola scriptura and sola fides, right? Are you?
Yes. Which I do actually address in the book too. So yes.
What's your position on that?
Sola scriptura is dumb. It doesn't make sense. So There you go. Because the what is the sola? It's that's what was chosen. Somebody mentions goes back to 300 AD. That's what was chosen in 300 AD, right? So clearly, does that mean everybody before 300 AD didn't have things correct? That doesn't make sense. So that's it's just a nonsensical premise just from the beginning. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was 3 centuries of Christianity before there was an official Bible, let's say.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and there are a lot of texts that didn't get into the Bible, but that are still, that even like Catholic scholars or whatever, even Protestant scholars would recognize as being the voices of church fathers, let's say, of people from authority, right? And even
Right.
There's a handbook of how the early Christians actually practiced the Didache, right? And the Didache is nobody suggests that it's heretical or something. It's not a philosophy book, so to say. It doesn't present a denomination. It tells you just exactly, like, it was a manual of how you were supposed to do a church service in around sometime around or before 100 AD. It was probably published in around the begin around 110 AD, something like that, right? But it was clearly drawn from earlier sources, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating book, right? And you see some stuff that is the same and some stuff that's different from what you see in the Catholic liturgy, right? But I mean, Catholicism itself has made radical changes over the course of its history, right? Like, I mean, for starters, you don't do the Latin Mass anymore, right? Maybe the new pope will be more permissive of it, right? But it's now been all but banned.
We have one close by here. I don't go to it every time because it's still about 45 minutes away, but they still practice it in one church over here, which is cool. Yeah, it's a really cool experience. If you've never been to one, I highly recommend it.
I've been to a few.
But I'm running out of time over here. This is right in the middle of dinner time for us here. California is 5 to 7, so I gotta get my kids fed.
Well, that's a pity. Yeah. I would love to have gotten more into details about your beliefs and having more talk about it, but maybe that'll be for another time.
I would love to come back. It's been great stuff, and you're a wonderful guy. I'm glad to be here. So happy 20th anniversary of doing this. This is amazing. And yeah, you were a pioneer in this space. Absolutely. You're not just puffing your own smoke there. You actually were. And it really paved the way for a lot of us, and I'm grateful to you for that. So good work.
Thank you very much. And guys, please check out the links that are in the description here, and check out Jon's YouTube channel too. I don't think I put the link to the YouTube channel, but I'm sure it's easy to find. It's Jon Del Arroz. So if you haven't seen him yet, check him out. And I hope we'll do this again sometime. Though I only do one show every 4 weeks, so it'll probably be a while before I start cycling back to previous guests. There is one final question that is the traditional final question to ask, which is kind of a contest because, I am generally speaking, I do hardly any nerd stuff. I'm into RPGs. I'm very into RPGs, but I don't do anime. I don't read sci-fi or fantasy novels anymore. I did when I was a kid, right? I did when I was younger. Comic books, video games, card games, none of that, right? I'm pretty much just an RPG guy. I have a lot of other weird interests, but not that would count as like nerd culture interests, right? And I've been asking every one of my guests, how nerdy are they, right? And so far, the reigning champion of the least nerdy guy is a guy named Driving and Dragons, because he only plays RPGs and he fixes classic cars, right? So those are that second one is the most unnerdy hobby a person could have, right? It's a sort of hobby that good old boys have, right? So he's the reigning champ. From what you've been talking about today, I can tell that already you've got obviously fantasy, sci-fi, card games. So I think that it's very clear you're not going to take the trophy from Driving and Dragons, but how nerdy would you rate yourself to be?
I don't know. I'm a tennis player. I'm probably one of the top guys at my local country club. So
Something.
I'm pretty
That is,
normal. So
yeah.
I'm wearing a NASCAR hat, as you can see. So it's the thing is, I just love everything culturally. And I just I just love the arts, from music to books to sports to everything, and I love just seeing excellence, right? And so I j- that I, I'm always down to try something. I like most things, and so but I get into CCGs, I get into RPGs, I write science fiction books for a living. I mean, I collect comic books, so I'm pretty. I have all the nerd categories probably checked off.
Fair enough.
I have painted miniatures. I'm not good at it. But I am trying to. There is a guy who's really good at it, kind of in my community. He's called the Collector, and I'm trying to shame him into, like, I'm trying to get him to be such a sycophant for me that he will paint my miniatures for me for free. But it's not working very well so far. So he's like, you can pay me," and I'm like, that kind of defeats the point. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm not into
Earlier.
trains. I'm not like one of those train guys.
Okay,
That's yeah.
that's something. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jon Del Arroz, not a train guy. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I'm going to stick around a little longer, so we're going to talk a bit more about my 20-year career in being the final boss of internet shitlords. And again, please check out Jon's stuff, and thank you very much for being here. So I'll let you go now.
Good work again. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad we could make this connect. And yeah,
it took us like
support
4
RPG
tries.
Pundit, guys. He's been a real one forever. As he's about to go through his history here. Don't be too humble about it. I think you deserve a lot of credit. So
I've never been accused of being humble. So
all right, see you, brother.
all right. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, guys. So that was Jon Del Arroz. And well, if you guys have any questions that are left over from, unfortunately he had to go early, but I'm going to keep being here for a little while longer and talking very briefly about my long-standing career as an internet shitlord. So I became the RPG pundit essentially in 2005. I don't know the very exact date, but it was around this time. So I've just decided that this, I know it's this year. So and I've decided this is going to be the 20th anniversary episode. And it started with me being pissed off at some of the trends that I was seeing on internet forums, specifically RPGNet, and in some parts of internet culture where they were already starting way back then to introduce leftist elements that were getting in the they were starting to get into the hobby, right? And so I ended up making a blog on Zanga.com, which if you are under 30, you have no idea what that is, but it was one of the many blogging sites that existed at the time. And I started writing critically about the state of the RPG hobby. So I ended up probably one of the first things that well, there were kind of two things that caught the attention. The first was that I was when the RPG Blue Rose came out, which was, in many ways, it was like the first woke RPG, right? It was like an RPG that was a fantasy world based very much on what leftist policy was at that time, right? Which by today's standards would probably be fairly mild, but it was already like a very kind of anti-democratic sentiment, and it had the bad guys were basically Christians, and stuff like that. And so I was very, very critical of that setting and its stupidity. But the other thing that is perhaps much more significant even today, one of the first things that got people's attention was an essay I wrote in that blog about lawn crappers. And what that was about was that I had noticed that there were people getting into the RPG hobby that weren't actually interested in RPGs. They were interested in other stuff. And that stuff usually had nothing to really do with Dungeons and Dragons or things like that. It had to do with sometimes just stupid and sometimes problematic political issues, right? And my essay was saying this: well, if you live in a neighborhood and in that neighborhood there's a guy who decides that for whatever reason, he's got a fetish or something, he decides he's going to poop on his lawn instead of in his bathroom, right? And just like as if he was a dog or something, just going to crap in his own lawn, and nothing is done about that. Then at some point, some other guy that likes to poop on his own lawn is going to come along, and he's going to see this guy doing that. He's going to say, wow, this is a place where I can come here and crap on a lawn, and nobody's going to have a problem with that. And so he's going to move into this neighborhood, not because he loves the neighborhood, because he loves the idea of being able to poop on a public lawn, his front lawn where everybody will see him, right? And pretty soon you're going to get more people that do that. And eventually you're going to have these guys taking over the neighborhood, right? And crapping all over everybody's lawn. And that if you don't maintain, nowadays they would call that the broken windows theory in some way, right? But this was before I had heard of that. And so this was my argument against the presence of like some of these people that were already there promoting like gender theory and furries and all of this stuff in the RPG context, and promoting radical leftist politics in RPGs, right? And that ended up making a real name for myself, and for many years I was basically a blogger. I became very well known for reviewing books that were sent to me that I would do review, written reviews on my blog. And when the OSR came along, I eventually, thank you very much, Spaces. That's $20 super chat. Thank you so much. 20 for 20 years. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, and that will help go to the Domino cat toy fund. I have no idea where Domino is right now. It's warmer now, so she's probably outside playing. But I'm surprised she hasn't come here all this time. I hope she's well. No, she's fine. I know her. If anything, it's the other cats that have to worry. So I was doing a lot of work as a reviewer. I'd made a lot of commentary on the state of the hobby, criticized things like the Ennies, which were bad even before they became woke, right? And the whole time I was fighting against kind of story gamers and the Forge. And when 4th edition happened, right, I realized that they were using the Forge theory. They were basically trying to create a gamist game out of the GNS theory of the Forge. And I predicted that 2/3 of the audience of current D&D would abandon that game, right? And 4E happened, and meanwhile I started writing some RPGs. I wrote a few RPGs that are probably not really all that memorable. And then I did Lords of Olympus, which was an homage to Eric Wujic and Amber, which is also, it's a diceless RPG. It's not OSR. It's a diceless RPG that is based on Amber diceless role-playing. And after that, I did Arrows of Indra. And by that time, 5th edition was announced. And there's this guy, Mike Merles. Mike Merles had been a commentator and a follower of my blog since the Zanga days. And so he knew me very well. And he had a very good impression about my ability to review RPGs and to analyze, the structure of the game and what it did well and what it did badly. And he was also aware of prediction I had made about 4E, which turned out to be exactly right. And so there, he hired me to be his consultant, his primary consultant, basically, for 5th edition. And I had a lot of influence in the overarching concept of 5e. I wasn't like working on specific rules, though I did promote and defend or sometimes reject certain rules, right? Like if I hadn't been there, it's not necessarily sure that they would have gone full on with the advantage and disadvantage mechanics. I had pushed, and I know that a lot of you probably don't like those mechanics, but I had seen that that would be a kind of killer app for casual players, where instead of having to like add and subtract stuff, they just had to roll the dice. Like that makes a very big difference for the casual players, which is one thing that you really want to get if you are like the big game that will be attracting casual players. And so I said, no, you have to go all in on that, right? Because at the time they weren't sure if they were going to use part of it or none of it or just sometimes or whatever. I said, no, go for it, right? And I think that was probably one of the biggest features of gameplay that made 5e so approachable for so many people. Again, it's not the game I would want to play. It's the game that I realized that Wizards of the Coast should want to make, right? So I did all that and made some good money there. And then after that, I started getting more serious about writing RPGs. And I guess it was around 2014 or so that I started this YouTube channel, right? And because blogs were dying, and I realized, I started seeing like the numbers of people reading my blogs were way down. And I saw that there were some other people who were already talking about RPGs on YouTube. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that. I did that. I was on Twitter also. And all along the way, especially from 5th edition onwards, right? Like after when 5th edition came out, and this was 6 months before Gamergate, there was something called Consultant Gate, right? Where the day that the player's handbook was in print and my name was on it, and also Zach Smith's, right? But it doesn't matter, my name was on it, right? There were a group of people that were trying to call for a boycott of D&D because of the two of us. And people that were calling for D&D to denounce me, for Mike Merles to denounce me, all of this sort of stuff. And it failed. And a lot of those people who had originally been people who hated D&D and wanted 5th edition to fail, they would have tried to find some other way to tank it. When they saw that D&D was becoming so successful, they changed their tune and then infiltrated it, right? So in a way, I won the cancellation attempt, but they ended up taking control of D&D, and then they ruined it eventually. But meanwhile, I went on to make all of my various games, which I think most of you probably know pretty well. And well, here I am. And I think, the best thing somebody already asked me what was the best thing about, my 20 years is my success. But the thing I'm most grateful for is the fans, right? Because like I pointed out earlier in my conversation with John, there was a long time where I was the only guy who was actually speaking up, right? And I can tell you, I'm not going to name names, right? But I can tell you that there were a lot of game designers and people working in the RPG field that were in touch with me privately, but they didn't dare say things publicly, right? And they were cheering for me, but they were too afraid to do it themselves. But I had a loyal group of readers from the blog era onwards, and then viewers, and obviously much more by the time I was in YouTube, because by then there were more people standing up. By that time, there were other people that were doing similar things to what I had done, right? But it was like the first 10 years or so, there were very, very, very few of us, right? It wasn't until around 2012 at the earliest that you started seeing other people that were doing kind of the same things I was doing now, right? So the other thing I'm very grateful for is you guys, is the fans. I'm not sure if there's anybody watching right now who has been around long enough to have like read my original blog or the blog that replaced it after that, because when Xanga went broke, I switched to Blogger. And if you're one of those guys from the old crew, the OGs, right, then I especially thank you. But if you're a new guy, this is like the first time you're watching me, maybe you saw something that John posted and you came to look, well, welcome aboard. You know, and there's nothing that I'm more grateful for, rather than proud of, but grateful for, is all of the guys who have been, you know, supportive and on my side and who like my games, right? And my hope is that, you know, if you buy my games because I'm based, well, great, right? But my hope is that you enjoy those games as well, and I think that most people do. You know, Diversity Drive says Nutkinland represent, yeah. Well, Nutkinland used to be the name of the RPG site. Yeah, that's one thing I missed in my story. At one point, there was a competitor to RPGNet that was originally called the RPG site. Then they changed their name to Nutkinland. And then the owners kind of gave up on it and it was dying. And I did a blog post where I said that, you know, it's a shame because this was supposed to be a free speech alternative to RPGNet, and you guys kind of dropped the ball. And the owner of Nutkinland contacted me and he said, oh yeah, well, I'd like to see you try. I'd like to see you do as well. And I said, well, I don't know, give me Nutkinland and I'll tell you, right? And so he gave it to me, and then there were people saying, oh yeah, this is going to be dead in 6 months, right? And I changed the name back to the RPG site because Nutkinland is a stupid name. It doesn't explain what it is. And it is still going on today. It is still a fairly thriving discussion forum for RPGs that is, you know, within the context of RPGs, right? Not for talking other things, but within the context of RPGs, it's a free speech site, right? You go there, you talk about RPGs, and it's an excellent site if you're not aware of it. The link is in the description to this video. All right, so anybody got any other comments and questions here, or questions that you would like to ask or that we'd like to talk about? Any topics that I haven't thought of, I guess. Judd Goswick found me on my second blog. Yeah, that would have been the blogger one. Yeah, the Zanga one. Geez, when did Zanga die out? 2009, I think, or 2010. I'm not so sure. Oh, well, that's great. I love the game. I'm not so much of a fan of Goodman Games as a company these days, but DCC is one of the greatest OSR games. That's excellent, Dan. I'm very glad. I want my games to be played. And, you know, my games, my products, they're not really political, right? My games are based on history for the most part, except for, you know, like Star Adventure isn't based on history, but and neither is World of the Last Sun. It's Gonzo fantasy, but they're not, you know, if you're hoping that it's going to be like a contemporarily political game, it's not. I mean, in some ways, because you're playing in the actual Middle Ages, you could say that it's, some people might think that's political in and of itself, but I don't mean it to be. And whatever politics are in the game have to do with what was really happening in the world at the time, right? Congrats on the 20 years. Been a fan for a long time. How do you decide on historical authentic being a major emphasis for you? Well, Mike, the thing is, I have degrees in history and comparative religion, right? But with the context of it being comparative religious history. And so this is my professional training, you could say. And I realized, you know, like I wanted, it started really, I did Arrows of Indra, which was not so much about like a historical thing, but more a mythological thing. And like Arrows of Indra is basically what, if the kind of experiment of doing an RPG that is Dungeons and Dragons, but based on Indian mythology of the Mahabharata, rather than you know, medieval fantasy, right? But then after that, I wanted to do a campaign based on the War of the Roses, and I initially started with running it as Lamentations of the Flame Princess, but I realized that those mechanics were not right for emulating a real medieval setting, right? And so I made Dark Albion the setting book, right, which is the War of the Roses with some fantasy elements. And then I did Lion and Dragon, which is the Dungeons and Dragons rules, but with with a medieval authentic style to them. And they turned out to be such a big success that I realized I wasn't sure at all if anyone was going to like that, right? Because I was thinking, well, it might seem too serious for some people, right? But I mean, there was a lot going for it actually, because the magic system is based on how people in that time thought magic worked. The monsters are based on real medieval sources of what monsters, medieval monsters of that region or whatever were like. And people found it really interesting. They found the idea of playing characters that behave, that aren't just in a medieval trapping setting. Like most fantasy settings are just basically Renaissance fair funland, right? Whereas this is like you're trying to play like you're really there, right? And apparently a lot of people really liked it, so that's great. Cossack says, what is the blue book? I'm not sure which blue book do you mean. Do you mean the Last Vikings? Is that the one you're talking about? That's my latest book, by the way. The Last Vikings, our latest big book, right? The Last Vikings is a complete campaign guide to playing in the late Viking period, in the beginning of the 11th century. And you're playing Vikings from the legendary fortress of Jomsburg. But you could also use it to play other Vikings of the same period. And it's got like a gazetteer that covers all of the North Sea and the Baltic Sea region, all the countries there, and what's going on in the history at the time. It has a magic system for Norse magic, right? Runes and Galder and Satyr magic. It has a monster section and magic item section based on Norse magic items and monsters, right? It's not a complete RPG. It's made to be run with by default with Baptism of Fire, but you could also run it with Lion and Dragon because they're practically identical as systems. But you could also run it with any other OSR game, right? That's part of the goodness of the OSR, right? So that's how the historical authentic thing ended up becoming a deal for me. Prophetic the Autistic says, how much of the Bible have you read? Well, I've read all of it. I've read all of it, and I've read deeply into some of it on many different occasions, different sections and things like that, because of my academic career and my interest in the study of religion, right? So I'm pretty well versed with the Bible. What would you say are the advantages of historical authentic RPGs? Well, I guess I just answered you that question, right? Is that you're playing, first of all, you're playing in a setting where you're taking the medieval part of it seriously, right? And that changes the game in many ways, and it makes it very interesting. It means it also breaks it out of being like a game that has to be more like a novel or a movie, and instead it's more like a chronicle, like a historical chronicle. And you get some novels that do that, right? Like Game of Thrones, part of the thing that made it popular for people is that it doesn't behave like a standard novel does, right? Like you have these guys that the way they're presented at the beginning, right? Like was Ned Stark. You think he's going to be the hero of the whole saga, right? And instead he just gets himself killed at the end of the first season or whatever, the first book, I guess. So it's like, in real history, it worked that way, right? Things are unexpected. But it also like has to do with like the social hierarchy, the presence of monotheism, the church, right? You adopt the culture and the religion, no, we got that one already. Degrees wise, so big. Well, I had my bachelor's was in history and my master's in comparative studies. I didn't do a PhD. Somebody said that already. I don't know if that was you who said it originally, but it mentions Luke Skywalker's uncle's abode. Well, somebody else, actually at the beginning of this video, somebody said, why is the pundit living in Obi-Wan Kenobi's house, right? As I pointed out at the beginning of this live stream, so I live in Uruguay, right? And this is a specific architectural style that is popular in Uruguay. It was more popular a couple of decades ago. This is an old house. This house is like 100 years old, and clearly sometime around the 1970s, I guess, or 80s maybe, or maybe even 90s, it was refurbished into this particular style, this kind of white stucco style. And if I was to show you in like other directions, you'd see like there are no like square windows or doors, right? They're like circular or archways, and that whole style is called Casa Pueblo, and it's a specific architectural style that exists here in Uruguay. I like it. It's one of the things I loved about this house. Behind you on the shelf. Oh, that book there. That's the Bible, actually. That is my Masonic Bible, which is really just a Bible with a Masonic concordance, King James. Oh my God! If you were to create a kids on bikes role, I hate those kind of role-playing games. What year or generation is it? When you approach this as a very serious game and keep the tone? Well, look, there are two kinds of games like that, and one of them is like. Actually, both of them are like this, but okay, one of them pretends that it's a game for kids to play where they play kids, right? And the other one is a game that is not, oh, look who's here, it's my cat. It's not for kids, it's for adults who want to play kids, right? And I find both of those distasteful, right? Like, kids don't want to play kids, right? When you're an 8-year-old, you do not want to play an 8-year-old having an adventure. You want to be Han Solo, right? Or at least I want it to be Han Solo. Maybe they don't want to be Han Solo now. Maybe they want to be Spider-Man, right? Or whatever. But like the kid wants to play an adult, right? I mean, when I was a teenager, I was 11 when I first played D&D. I wasn't playing an 11-year-old character. I wanted to play a 100-year-old elf, or whatever. And then, adults playing kids is usually just weird because, adults, whatever it is, you don't end up thinking like a kid, right? So it just becomes this weird kind of nostalgia thing. And I just don't think either of those work very well. So I don't think I'd ever do a game like that, What is my favorite historical period? That is a very tough call. I mean, I like obviously a lot of the time periods that I've been making games out of, right? Like I'm very fascinated. I was very fascinated for a very long time with the War of the Roses. So that was where it all started in a way, the historical authentic stuff. And when I made Lion and Dragon, I realized, okay, so this is late medieval, right? Because the War of the Roses starts in England. At the start of the War of the Roses, it's the Middle Ages. By the end of the War of the Roses, it's the Renaissance, right? Because the war lasted like 30 years. So I really loved that setting, but I wanted to have also earlier medieval settings, right? Because those have a different feel to them. So then I did Sword and Caravan, which is in the Third Crusade, right? So it's a couple hundred years before the War of the Roses. And then after that, I did Baptism of Fire, which is set even earlier. It's set in the 11th century, right? It's early medieval. So I want to have all of those in, right? And I love all of those, but I'm a fan of a lot of history and a lot of, the humanities is my thing, right? And so I'm a fan of a lot of history and a lot of different cultures. Which is part of why Sword and Caravan isn't just the Third Crusade. It's also it's technically the Third, Fourth, and Fifth Crusade. All of those are within the timeline of the campaign book, but it is also the whole Silk Road, and the campaign period goes from the beginning of the Third Crusade until 1220 in the Mongol invasion, right? So you can even fight Genghis Khan at the end if you like, or try to. And I'm, I was as fascinated with detailing the weird cultures that existed along the Silk Road just before Genghis Khan blew it all to shit, as I was talking about the Holy Land, right? And I'm it's hard for me to say favorites in terms of time periods, right? None of them are places I would like to live, right? Because I know how it's like. But there's a lot of different time periods that I love, and there's others that I still haven't gotten around to writing. You know, I'm pretty sure at some point fairly soon I'm going to make a game set in probably the mid or late Roman Empire. So I like the Romans. Who doesn't, right? One thing I was never like. I mean, I don't mind Vikings at all, right? But I was never like a giant fan of Vikings. But I know that a lot of other people like Vikings a lot, right? And when I discovered that Jomsburg, which for a long time, including up to very recently, was thought of as a myth, probably was real, and it was probably on an island on the Pomeranian coast of Poland, I said, well, I've got to put those two together, right? Because also the Joms Vikings are fascinating, right? So that's what led me to do. Like, I'm not a giant fan of Vikings. I'm generally on the side of civilization rather than the raiders, right? But in this case, it was just too cool to pass up. Frank, thank you for your congratulations. I don't know, I might have missed you already because I'm falling behind. That's very good. That's a good thing to check. And I don't know if you're Jewish or not, but you know, it does pay off a lot if you're studying the Old Testament to look not just at Christian commentaries of the Old Testament, but at Jewish commentaries. For games, do you think that these should be backed up by mechanics or just by describing it? Well, it kind of depends on the game, Judd. So like you're asking about fencing styles, for example. So if you're playing a game where for the reasons of the genre or the setting, fencing is very important, then you probably should have fencing styles, right? Like, so there's a Spanish game called Capitana la Triste, right? And it's based on a series of novels that are about a swashbuckling military man during the beginning of the collapse of the Spanish Empire. And there, you know, like the use of the fencing styles is something that you have to do more at least than you would normally do in a D&D based game, right? You have to add maneuvers and things like that because it's a big deal, right? It's sort of like, you know, if you're doing like a shootout in a normal game, it's not something you have to worry too much about, right? But if you're doing a shootout in a Wild West game, you have to have something about it, right? You have to make it into something special, right? Same thing with horse breeds, right? If you're running a game where your horses are very important, then yes, you should have something. And, you know, there, like I said, there's an issue of the Pundit Files that was co-written. So one of the only ones that was co-written by the Matt Hermit, where he did an elaborate set of tables and guidelines about horses. And like, you know, it gives your horse a personality, right? Now, you don't need that in every game, but it's an interesting thing to have in some games for just out of curiosity. But in some games, it could be like really important, right? Like, again, if you're doing a cowboy game where you're constantly going around on horseback, that might be a thing to look at, right? So I would say that it depends on the genre style, you know. Ditto with gun stats, right? Like one of the criticisms I got for The Invisible College, which is a modern day setting game, right? It's an occult investigation game, but it's also got like kind of elements of secret agents and espionage and stuff like that, is that my gun mechanics were just very basic. And there were several people that have then tried to suggest more complex rules for, you know, like for the variety of firearms that you can get in the modern era. And they might be right, you know, especially for certain versions of that campaign. Mike Neckerfen says, I always thought the War of the Roses was fascinating, but insanely complicated. Well, it was very complicated. There's a lot of back and forth going on there, right? It makes it interesting. That's why I like the shifting sands of fate were very interesting there. Peace Chandler said, how long would any of us have lasted in those eras on the real? Well, it depends. I mean, there were lots of people who managed to be very successful in their times and lived to ripe old ages, even some of them, at least. So it kind of varies. History is probably all made up, says Peace Chanter. It is. I disagree, but there are always new things we're discovering about history, and so we have to be ready to change our entire perception on it from time to time. You know. Yeah, well, that's if you like that kind of thing, you're gonna like my games, right? Like in Sword and Caravan, you can literally run a game where you can meet young Temujin before he becomes Genghis Khan, or you can meet him once he's already the king of kings of the Mongols, or you could end up being on the side that's trying to stop it, right? Which is not a good life expectancy for the people on those sides, but some of them were really remarkable dudes, right? Peace Chandra says, "You want to know how I know you're happy? You like the Romans." Yeah, I am happy, and I do like the Romans. Diversity and Dragons, congrats on 20. Thank you so much. I'm very glad to have guys like Double D now who are continuing the work. You know that they're doing what I've been doing all this time. It's pretty great. You know, I mean, obviously, since that time, there's also been the development of like people who come up who are on social media and have really terrible takes, or are just shills or grifters or what have you, right? But I mean, yeah, like until around 2012, 2014, it was just me, right? And then there was like suddenly these people, there were more people coming along, gradually certain people that were saying stuff and standing up and things like that, right? James Radji was one of them. Grim Jim was one of them before he went completely nuts, right? And you know, there was suddenly I wasn't the only guy, right? And that was a bit of a relief, right? And then there were more and more people who had started out just like being people who commented on my blog, but who were then like, you know, once social media started to take off on Google Plus and then later on X and stuff, they started jumping in and making their own commentary too, right? Even if they weren't like game designers or stuff, they were still speaking out, right? And that was great. I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what you're talking about there, but okay, here we go. RPG Pundit design question. When in your books you say reduce saving throw DC by 1, why do you express it that way instead of saying +1 to the roll? Art is great. Well, because I think it's easier. Like you start a level 0 character by default starts with a saving throw number of 16, right? That's modified by charisma, and some classes get an immediate reduction because they're lucky or what have you. And then like as you go along, instead of just having a bigger plus, you can just lower the number. That means you have to worry less about calculating the math at the moment, right? It's one less thing you have to look at. But you could totally do it your way, right? Yeah, absolutely. You could just the number could always be 16, and then you just have a modifier that you roll to the die roll to save. Like if you want to do it that way, it works exactly the same way, right? Do I have a favorite official D&D setting? Well, my favorite official D&D setting is Mystara, and that is probably because I ran Mystara for about 10 years. I ran a 10-year-long campaign set in Mystara. I loved it. Originally it was the known world. It was the setting for the D&D basic and expert sets, right? And then later it got the name Mystara along the way, and it's got stuff like some of the stuff in World of the Last Sun is like the flying ships, right? It's that's right from there, you know, like, and these weird cultures that are all just like in a ridiculous, crazy quilt surrounded, like where you have like here's the Arab culture, and right next door are the like Norsemen, right? It doesn't matter, you know. Like I thought that was so great, you know. I thought it was Mystara had a kind of Gonzo vibe to it, like the inner world, right? Like the hollow world. I loved it, you know. It was my favorite, and then I had others that I liked. I liked to play in the early days. The Forgotten Realms was really good. It became worse and worse the more novels that they wrote and the more source books that they made, right? But like the first box set of the Forgotten Realms, my God, that was fantastic, you know. The art in Baptism of Fire is great. Yeah, Baptism of Fire does have great art, and that isn't my. I had nothing to do with that, right? Because I do not publish my own games. I always get a publisher, usually an indie publisher, that I looked at products that they had before and I thought they were good, right? And in this case, Baptism of Fire and and Sword and Caravan and the Last Vikings, they're all from Mad Scribe Games, which is just, he's an incredible publisher, makes great products, and yeah, I really like it. I really like it. Good call on Mystara. Yeah. Nice to see other Mystara fans. It was not one of the most popular settings. Yeah, early Forgotten Realms was sword and sorcery. It was a sword and sorcery setting. And then it got changed to medieval Renaissance fair funland. And then much later it became 2022 Fantasy Seattle, you know. So which D&D setting do you think WotC butchered the most? Oh, that is a real challenge. So in Dragonlance, they essentially destroyed the plot of Dragonlance with their Dragonlance sourcebook, right? Because stuff because they felt that some of the stuff at the beginning of the War of the Lance was problematic, they removed it. But in fact, in the novels, those are things that sometimes get changed by the end of the novels. It's like at the beginning of the novels, it was meant to show, oh, like the Solamnic Knights are kind of dumb because they're hidebound to these traditions, right? Like they don't accept women, and then by the end of it, they end up accepting a woman, right? So, so that changed in the novels, but instead in the setting, because they can't show the Solamnic Knights not accepting women, they immediately have, you know, black women as Solamnic Knights, or so that was pretty bad. Planescape was pretty bad. But I think the worst one of all is Ravenloft, actually, because in Ravenloft, you know, Ravenloft is meant to be Victorian, moralistic, Gothic horror, and it's good versus evil, right? And in the original Ravenloft, I mean, not the module, but in the original box set of the Ravenloft setting, you had these dark powers, right? And the dark powers would try to tempt you with powers that would give you benefits but would also corrupt you, and if you took them, it might help you survive, but then later you would become more and more evil, right? And in the new book, they just said, yeah, there are these dark powers. Everybody can have one. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really do anything to you. It just makes you cooler, right? So like it doesn't matter, right? The dark powers don't do anything, right? Like it's not. It destroyed the entire concept of being corrupted by the temptation of evil, because of course they're not going to say that. There's no such thing to them as good and evil, right? So I think that on a fundamental level, because of that destroys the entire concept of Ravenloft much more than anything they did to Spelljammer or Planescape or the Realms or, you know, Dragonlance, any of them, right? So I think that was the worst one. Dan Vince, they're gearing up to ream Dark Sign. Yeah, well, we're not 100% sure of that yet. That might have just been a one-shot thing they did because they needed to write an article. But it's possible. Yeah, it's possible that they're going to ream Dark Sun. All right. Any other questions, guys? Anything else to comment about? Anything in the news this that since we started this live stream, because I haven't been watching. Well, okay. So I suppose we're at almost 3 hours now, so it's might as well be a good time to wrap up. I'd ask you guys, please If you like this live stream, please share it. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the like button. Mike Neckerfent says, "What didn't you like about Planescape?" Well, I wasn't a huge fan of the original Planescape either. I thought it was like a little too hipster, I guess. But and I preferred like the manual of the planes, right? The manual of the planes was much more interesting because it was like you had to get to be high level and then you go to the planes, right? Planescape made it so you could have level 1 characters in the planes, and then that makes it more quotidian, you know, it makes it less interesting. It means everybody can be there. But I mean, in the new Planescape, if that's what you mean, they ended up like introducing new factions that are essentially based on, you know, modern day leftism, right? So they were pretty terrible. Yes, you do. This is one of my players of the Sword and Caravan game. He's playing a Sufi guy, and he just had his apprentice be brutally murdered by dog-headed men. Do I think Trump is innocent? Do I think he's innocent of what? Please, can I Greyhawk Grognard be the next guest? Well, you know what? I'd be happy to have Greyhawk Grognard be a guest. Maybe I'll consider that. You know, probably my next guest is going to be somebody who's newer though. Like, so he might be the one after that, because I like to alternate. You know, one time I'll have somebody who's relatively well known, like John, and the next time I'll try to find someone who is not as well known, right? Someone who's just starting up in RPG design or has just started a YouTube channel or something like that. But I will definitely keep that in mind. And if you want, mention it to the Greyhawk Grognard. 37 counts of bad checkmate. I don't know what you guys are talking about. For my soul's release from bondage. Well, I think all of us are in bondage in some way or another. Not the kind that some people think, but all right. I still have no idea what you're talking about, Peace Chanter, but and you seem to think that you're saying something important. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe I missed a post or something. He's on the good drugs, says the Arabic. That might be it. Peace Chanter. I'm being pressed on this. No, okay. So you're talking about the Epstein files. Okay, is that what you're talking about? Yes, the Epstein files. I think it's pretty clear that there isn't really a list per se. There are probably a lot of names, but it sure seems like there really isn't a list, right? Like, and I do not think that Donald Trump is there, that there's any association that Donald Trump did anything criminal regarding Epstein. Okay. What is maybe possible is that there are, I mean, what we know is very, very likely to be possible is that there are associates of Epstein who are famous people, powerful people, rich people, right? And yes, Trump was one of them, but Trump was the one guy that like cooperated in the initial investigation, and he also ended up feuding with Epstein, right? He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, famously. But there are lots of other, you know, people of power in industry and media and you know, Hollywood, in politics, princes of the realm, as we well know. All of those people who are involved in what Epstein did. Is it possible that that there's actually any proof that the FBI has about any of them having done anything? I would say that there's a very good chance that there is not. Right? I don't know if I'm not sure if there ever was. And if there ever was, it was probably destroyed. Right? And it's possible that there was, even at the time that they got a hold of the material, and that the FBI itself destroyed it during the time of the Biden White House. It's possible. I can't say for sure, but it's certainly possible. But what I do think might be going on now is that they have a list of people that were associated with Epstein, some of whom we already know about, right? And some of whom we might not know about. Some of them might be politicians who are still active or influential in both parties, right? And I don't think that there's on either side enough evidence that can be used to actually make any kind of a case against any of them, even if you can strongly suspect that they're guilty of something, right? So I think that what has actually happened is that the White House has decided that it would not be a wise move, politically speaking, and possibly, in terms of the risk of lawsuits and the like, for them to present a bunch of names of people that are peripherally associated to Epstein, but that they aren't actually going to be able to charge with anything, right? And so that has put them into a very uncomfortable position, which they have handled really, really badly, right? They have not gone about it the right way. A lot of that is on the head of Pam Bondi, right? It's definitely been fumbled very badly, Judd. Yes, I absolutely agree. Dan Vince says, well, we're asking silly questions. Was Epstein a CIA asset or a Mossad asset? Well, I suspect that Epstein wasn't either, if what you mean was he like himself a direct agent of some intelligence service. I think what he was a scammer. And he had, but could he have had connections to either of those? Yeah, it's certainly possible, right? That he could have had connections. I'm thinking he pretty much had to have big connections. He had connections in big business, that's clear, and in Hollywood, and with tech companies, apparently, right? So he made a point of making powerful friendships as a way that he thought would make him bulletproof, right? So, but I don't think that he was a member of any spy agency, if that's what you mean. I don't know why you guys are asking me this, though. I mean, it's not like I'm a secret agent or something, So, yeah, that's also possible too. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's a possibility. Like there might be stuff, maybe that there's stuff that they're still trying to investigate and they don't want to let on because that might alert the people involved. That would be kind of hopeful, Yeah, so that's my position. I'm sorry, I didn't catch where you mentioned Epstein. So or at least I didn't understand what you were saying about him. So now that you asked, well, there we go. Well, it's not you guys, it's this guy, the guy in the good drug. Everyone knows that if you want the truth, you ask an RPG content. Not quite, Judd. You ask an RPG pundit. All right, guys. I guess that's everything on that ridiculous final note. Please check out my products. By the way, check out if you're interested in space opera. Check out the latest issue of the Pundit Files. You can only get it at the Red Room store. The link is in the description to this video. The latest issue of the Pundit Files is issue 38, I believe it is. And it is called Sons of Heaven, Races and Regions of the Galaxy. It's one of several issues of the Sons of Heaven series, which is my bit by bit. I'm presenting my space opera setting for Star Adventure. This one is all like the setting lore, the details of the setting, like what are the different races of the galaxy and where are they and what are they doing, what are their priorities and their culture, and you get which stats you use for each one. Because all my previous books are more about like generating things for actual play until now. So this is the first time I'm giving you an overview of the whole galaxy, which will hopefully help you put it more into context if you're interested in the Sons of Heaven series. Okay, so be sure to check that out. Thank you guys for wishing me congratulations, or 20 more years. Yeah, I hope I can make 20 more years. I'm not sure, but if I can, great. You know, it would be a lot of fun, because at least it's been fun so far. You know, not without its bumps, but I've always come out on top. So thank you very much, guys. The next Pundit encounter should be, I think, on the 19th of October. So there you go. And just try to keep that date open. I think that'll be when we're going to be doing it. And yeah, we'll see you all later. Currently smoking. This is a Near Up Acorn with Argento roots. Take care, guys.